So the Israelis said America has to stay in Saudi to balance against them both. And that was what got us attacked.
I totally get that there's sort of different enemies there.
But, well, you're wrong, because this is just Israeli propaganda.
Okay.
This is what Joe Biden says. That's why we have to invade Iraq. But don't worry, then a bunch of magic is going to kick in. It's going to be just like the theology that you read in books that you bought at Walmart, where everybody else gets left behind, but not you, because you had the good, true faith and supported the invasion of Iraq for Israel. I admittedly have a chip on my shoulder, right? That's what's going on here. I have a vendetta because the Israelis played such a large role in lying us into war with Iraq.
Yes.
And I'm not over it. It's still 2002 to me. Let's fight. You know what I mean? That's just how I feel about it. The only place we really differ here, I think, is you are more afraid of what would happen if we ripped the Band-Aid off, where I don't think it'd be a problem at all.
I mean, it might be a problem, but I'm ready for it. Okay, quick introduction and disclaimer up front. I had a lot of fun with Scott Horton. I really like this conversation. I don't agree with everything that he says or in the manner or way that he says it all the time, but I think the time we're in politically is creating a lot of interesting bedfellows that we do agree on some certain things and maybe common sort of targets of our ire. So I just wanted to put that out up front. You're going to hear me try to push back on a few things, maybe tease some things out. And I wasn't entirely satisfied with all of those things being teased out. So I'm actually going to come back at the very end of this, just lopped on to the end of this video, with a couple of things that I just want to pick up that I wasn't quite satisfied on, or I want to clean up a little bit. But I had a ton of fun with Scott. I think Scott Horton's super interesting, and enjoy me and Scott Horton. First, why don't you tell me and the audience, people who don't know you, a little bit about yourself, how you got involved in these questions as an author, or when your interest kind of started. Yeah.
Well, I'm just a typical anti-government libertarian type from Austin, Texas. I'm a Ron Paul guy, have been since the 90s. And then, I just already knew better before the terror wars. I knew that September 11th was coming for years before it did happen. And I knew how they would exploit it. And I predicted, even as a 10th grader, the day that W. Bush announced that he too was running for governor, like his brother Jeb in 1994. I told my math teacher, you see what they're doing here? They're making sure that at least one of them will be a second-term governor for the year 2000, which means they're going to throw the election in 96 and make sure that Bill wins, so that a Bush will win in 2000, and then they're going back to Iraq because they can't live down the embarrassment of the old man got voted out after only one term, with Saddam still in the chair laughing at his ass. There's a whole Bill Hicks joke and everything. I just knew that was coming. I saw it just years and years and years in advance. So when the time came, when W. Bush came to power and all the terror wars and all that kicked off, I started palling around with the guys from antiwar.com, who were they were really the very best on this. And I was already doing radio, but a friend convinced me that, what you should do is you should do an interview show where you're interviewing all the best guys you're reading and then just post all the interviews online. Kind of finally, I had put off even getting the internet because I just want to live off the grid. And I always saw it as a giant NSA surveillance tool from the very beginning. But then I decided that, whatever, it's a double-edged sword. We got to use it. So I was doing pirate radio, but then I was taking my interviews and posting them online. And I now got more than 6,000 of those you can find at Scott Horton.
Yeah. Your archive would take a lifetime to get through. Yeah. All right. So, well, let's just jump in there, because I love that the first question led to 9/11, because we're going to go to it a lot. But I wanted to just back up first with a sort of cultural moment to see if you see what I'm seeing. You're a little bit older than me. I was born in 82, so my coming of age was a little later. 9/11 hit when I was a sophomore in college, just to place sort of my timeline. But I've never seen a moment quite like we're in now in the conversation that I'm a little excited about. Zionism has been a bugaboo in my life. I grew up in a Jewish family, and I've been sort of fighting that battle for a long time. And so it's been really frustrating. But seeing, and I know you've been directly engaged with some of these people like Tucker Carlson, seeing a certain faction of maybe a conservative-minded or even a MAGA libertarian, voted for Trump kind of person, they seem to be having a little bit of a mental traffic jam of this America first mantra and then Israel first. And it's clashing in their heads. And I'm seeing, at least from my perspective, I'm a leftist, although I think you and I have a ton in common with our analysis of the world, because I'm seeing, okay, that's great. There's an entryway here. They're seeing this clash. Israel first, America first. What's going on? And now some of them are asking some really big, good questions about what that clash is, why they might be having that clash. How are you sort of reconciling that? If you understand my question, I feel like there's a really big entryway here about are they part of the same empire, or like how do we make that clear for people?
Well, look, what you're really describing is this great crack up that's coming on the left and the right, where despite all of the propaganda that we've been told our whole lives, if you actually examine the facts at all, you can see how Israel and America's interests are completely diametrically opposed. Their enemies are the Shiites. They would have us back Al-Qaeda against Hezbollah. But I don't give a goddamn about Hezbollah, right? That's their problem. They didn't knock our towers down. It was the bin Ladenites that knocked our towers down. And because of this Israel first policy, as you put it, Israel instead, our government is purely willing under Bush, Obama, and Trump, perfectly willing to side with America's avowed enemies, those who legitimately have the blood of American civilians on their hands in the thousands, and American soldiers too. They'll side with them as long as they can spite Israel's enemies. That's why you see him championing the Al-Qaeda takeover of Syria right now. You know, Donald Trump went over there and shook hands with al-Shara and said, who's just Abu Muhammad al-Jawlani, the former leader of Al-Qaeda in Iraq and Syria.
I'm gonna put that wanted poster right here, right now, just so people remember $10 million bounty. Right. Yeah.
Well, Donald Trump says he has a strong past.
Yeah.
That means he killed Americans fighting in Mosul and Ramadi and bragged about it. He said he was inspired by September 11th to join the jihad against the United States. So he traveled to Iraq to kill Americans fighting for Abu Musab al-Zarqawi. And why does Donald Trump love the guy? Because Benjamin Netanyahu says so. Now, you can be a good conservative Republican, American, George Washington's Constitution revering patriot and oppose that, but you can't be one and support it.
Yeah.
It's America first or Israel instead.
Okay.
We didn't need to go back to Iraq, except that Benjamin Netanyahu wanted America to go back to Iraq.
Yeah.
We didn't need to overthrow Bashar al-Assad, except that Benjamin Netanyahu wanted us to overthrow Bashar al-Assad. And so these are two of the very worst, and I know there's a lot, but these are two of the very worst American policies in the last 25 years that at their absolute core, and same for all of our problems with Iran in the first place. All these problems begin in Tel Aviv.
Yeah.
All these problems have nothing to do with the interests of the American people whatsoever. And Israel doesn't even have any oil. Israel doesn't do anything for us, only to us. And talking about September 11th, they were the reason we were attacked. You know, everybody knows, everyone in your audience should know, that America backed the bin Ladenites, not just the local Afghans, but the bin Ladenites who, you know, the Arab Afghan army, the international Islamic brigades who went to Afghanistan to fight the Soviet commies in the 1980s. But then they kept backing them. They backed them in Bosnia, Kosovo, and in Chechnya, too. These are America, Britain, and Saudi Arabia's pet mercenary terrorists. We use them to murder Serbs, to murder Russians, to murder Shiites. That's what they're good for. But then why do they hit us? They hit us because Bill Clinton, even though he was backing them, was still bombing Iraq from bases in Saudi Arabia. And he was still supporting the Likud, murdering whoever they want, confiscating people's private property in Palestine and in Lebanon. And so that was it. They said, what we're going to do is replicate our war against the Soviet Union. We're going to bait the Americans into invading Afghanistan, and then we'll bog them down and bleed them to bankruptcy. Now, why did America do that to the Soviets in Afghanistan? They were trying to replicate what they had just done to themselves in Vietnam. They said, now we're going to give them their own Vietnam. And then they did.
Right.
And then the bin Ladenites said, now we're going to give the Americans their own Afghanistan. And then they did. And that was the deal. That was what it was always about, was revenge for American foreign policies. These are our government's own pet terrorists. We're the ones who turned on us. Yeah. And they did it primarily, like when you talk about recruiting the pilot hijackers, how did they recruit the pilot hijackers? By pointing at Israel's crimes against the people of Palestine and Lebanon. That was why Mohammed Atta, the lead hijacker, crashed into the North Tower.
Yeah, being spied on by Mossad agents who were in Hollywood, Florida, and all that stuff.
Them around for sure.
So let me pause. That was a lot. Let me pause there because I think this is cool. This is gonna be really cool. I think we have an opportunity here because I want to try to philosophically unpack a lot of what you said, play my leftist cards on the table, and see where they match. Because I think there's a ton there that obviously I agree with, and you're insanely learned on the specifics, and we're going to get into some of the covert operations and what was really going on there. And, the central question for someone like me coming of age when 9/11 hit, again, you were already sort of on board with this, was this, I'll put up a Newsweek cover, the why do they hate us, right after 9/11, and then the George W. Bush speech at the State of the Union where it was this flowery, they hate us because of our freedoms, because of what's happening in this room, or whatever. I'll play it for people so they can remember.
Americans are asking, why do they hate us? They hate what they see right here in this chamber, a democratically elected government. Their leaders are self-appointed. They hate our freedoms, our freedom of religion, our freedom of speech, our freedom to vote and assemble and disagree with each other. They want to overthrow existing governments in many Muslim countries, such as Egypt, Saudi Arabia, and Jordan. They want to drive Israel out of the Middle East. They want to drive Christians and Jews out of vast regions of Asia and Africa. These terrorists kill not merely to end lives, but to disrupt and end a way of life. With every atrocity, they hope that America grows fearful, retreating from the world and forsaking our friends. They stand against us because we stand in their way. We're not deceived by their pretenses to piety. We have seen their kind before. They are the heirs of all the murderous ideologies of the 20th century. By sacrificing human life to serve their radical visions, by abandoning every value except the will to power, they follow in the path of fascism, Nazism, and totalitarianism. And they will follow that path all the way to where it ends, in history's unmarked grave of discarded lies.
Seeing through that of like, no, they hate us because of all of these interweaving, geopolitics and backstabbing and American intervention. And I think you're totally right. But the one thing that I actually, the reason why I brought like Tucker Carlson, who I know you had a great conversation with him, and there's people like Candace Owens and Dave Smith and this interesting faction of the MAGA group who is having a problem right now. And I think the Epstein files is a huge entryway too, because guess which foreign country just keeps coming up in all of these conversations, and they're like, what the hell's going on? And it's a potentially dangerous path, right? And Tucker gave the speech at Turning Points where he's like, let's not do the crazy conspiracy theory stuff, but it's going to happen unless we really have an honest conversation about this stuff now. And so when you say Israel and their interest is like diametrically opposed to American interest, me as a leftist, I think there's something a little missing in that analysis, but you tell me why I'm wrong. I totally get that there's sort of different enemies there.
But, you're wrong because this is just Israeli propaganda. Okay. This is what Joe Biden says. If Israel didn't exist, we would have to invent it. But then they cite no examples at all ever of what they have ever done for us, other than they helped Obama back Al-Qaeda in Syria. But that was Obama helping them. That was Obama committing treason on Israel's behalf against the United States. They didn't help us fight Iraq War I. They didn't help us fight Iraq War II, even though we fought that war for them. Yeah. So that they could not even get the oil pipeline to Haifa rebuilt. Right. They do nothing for us, nothing except get our civilians killed. Look at what happened in Washington. Where this guy assassinated 2 civilians out in front of the Israeli embassy a few weeks ago. Another guy did this flamethrower attack at a pro-Israel rally in Boulder. One guy died like weeks later of his injuries from that. And they won't release the facts here, but I'm willing to speculate, and I'll bet you no matter what, my dollars to your dimes, that the New Orleans attacker of New Year's Eve, who killed 12 people on Bourbon Street and injured dozens more, that was motivated by Israel's genocide in Gaza, supported by the Democrats and the Republicans in the United States of America. We pay for about 70% of it, and we provide about 90% of the bombs, of course, the planes and all the logistics and intelligence and everything, helping them every bit of the way there. And that's why they won't release the transcript, right? That's why it's buried, is because we know they did admit that he was ranting on video in manifesto messages to his family all the way driving from Houston to New Orleans.
Yeah.
And then there he kills all these people. That's Americans being crucified for Israel's sins. We get absolutely nothing out. What are we going to get out of Gaza? Oh, we're going to build a resort there and all this? No, right? None of that. So what do we get out of it except dead American civilians?
Yeah.
And so when people say, no, it's because of American capitalism requires Israel to exist. Oh, yeah? Elaborate then. Yeah. Explain to me how we save a nickel on a barrel of oil because of anything that Israel has ever done for us other than steal our missile designs and sell them to the Chinese.
Yeah, no, totally. With
They're our enemies.
Let me just be transparent. I have another motivation in my head that's important to me is to and I think this is coming into the world, is to make a clear distinction between liberals and the left. Because I think the Democrats and Biden.
I'm not confused about that.
Right. But
see, leftists, your economics are completely stupid and wrong. Sorry. You don't understand things, and you think that everything the government does is because the capitalists are making them do it.
No.
The state is the state. Do you think Vladimir Putin does what the oligarchs say, or they do what he says? That's how it works here too. The state is the one with the $7 trillion budget. Okay, so it's not that capitalists make the government do what they want. The empire is its own engine and its own end.
Well, yeah. So why don't so that's what I want to talk about. What, in your view, because we probably agree here more than you think, and I haven't even revealed sort of my economics on it. What do you think the mechanics of empire are here? So in your responses there, and sort of the they should be our enemy thing. So I have two questions. What do you think the mechanics of empire are? And take this back to like post-World War II or maybe Woodrow Wilson at least. What are the specific mechanics? Because I've been interested, in people, Americans don't get a great education on this, of just understanding the mechanics of the petrodollar and how that incentivizes debt and blah, blah, blah. Which I think is crucially important and missing from a lot of the analysis in these conversations. And it's where I slot in things like Israel. But I agree. I guess my question is, do you think Israel is kind of the rabid dog that got out of the way and now is just blackmailing people, and that's why they seem to be controlling so much? Is it that sort of, or is it just a miscalculation of the empire? I don't know. That's a lot to put on your plate, but I think important.
Yeah, no, it's okay. Yeah. I mean, look, the empire overall is a government program. And so, yes, of course, there are trillions at stake, and there are all kinds of companies involved in pushing the thing and getting their interests taken care of. For example, the oil companies, most of all. I mean, Standard Oil of New Jersey already was its own gigantic multinational corporation before World War II. And after World War II, when they built the State Department, we only had a few ambassadors to a few countries at that time. So when they built the global State Department, they built it on the skeleton of Standard Oil. I mean, it was the Rockefellers' world empire. That was what Murray Rothbard called it, the Rockefeller world empire after World War II. And it had much to do with, supporting their financial interests around the world, especially in oil and banking and whatever they were investing in, heavily invested in Asia and all that. In fact, Rothbard said World War II was a compromise between the Morgans and the Rockefellers. The Morgans got to have their war in Europe, and the Rockefellers got to have their war in Asia. And then by the end of the thing, the Rockefellers were dominant. But then the problem is they all died, right? There were the 5 grandsons, and they all got old. And then what happened was they had just built this empire, and nobody's in charge anymore, right? Like, we'd probably be better off if there was some table at Skull and Bones where, like, somebody is actually in charge here. And instead what we have is, like, this poor use of this term, but I think you'll understand what I mean, this anarchic imperial court where there's really no one in charge other than who can get pictures of you and a kid, or who can bribe you with enough money to put your kid in private school, or whatever it is to get people to go along with the program. And then the program is perpetual war. Now, when it comes to virtually all of this, it's at the detriment of the interests of the American people. Like, for example, they make these trade deals where we'll drop all our tariffs on you, but you can keep all your tariffs on us. In other words, the government gets what they want. The American people get screwed, but the government gets to have a military base, right? In Korea, in Italy, in Japan, in Germany, wherever they want to dominate policy. So you can sell all your stuff to our people with no tariffs, but we get to dominate your foreign policy. What does that mean for American workers? It means our standard of living is decreased so that the government can have a military base, right? So this is diametrically opposed to the interests of the average American, but it's in the interest of the connected few. And if you haven't ever read, I really recommend that you and your audience read The Israel Lobby and American Foreign Policy by Walt and Mearsheimer. And in that book, these guys they're the deans of the realist school of foreign policy. They're not controversial people, except when people lie about them, which they do. But in that book, they go, look, man, as you just said, why get into like crazy conspiracies? How about just like the not crazy ones? Like, this is how democracy works. Democracy is not, everybody just is free and goes to whatever church they want. Democracy is a giant faction fight over who controls the resources and who can, cobble together a 51% majority so that they have control of the system, wherein the squeaky wheel gets the grease. So, if the aluminum companies won't shut the hell up, they'll get their tariff, right? Same thing with the Israel lobby. And if we're talking about really any organized power versus unorganized masses, it's the same thing. Mm-hmm. Money buys office buildings full of lawyers and secretaries. And with office buildings full of lawyers and secretaries, you can do anything, right? Like, there's nothing like that the anti-war movement has to match. But AIPAC, it's all just in the spreadsheet. It's easy. You want to run for Congress? Great. Sign this thing that says you pledge your loyalty to AIPAC forever and we'll support you. Don't sign it and we'll support the guy who's opposing you in the primary. And if you win in the primary, then we'll see you in November. And if you win in November, then we'll see you in 2 years. You're either going to do what we say or we're going to destroy you. And that's how democratic politics are supposed to work, except that this is a foreign country and American fifth columnists representing the interests of a foreign country to the detriment of the people of the United States of America. So unlike the gun lobby or the old people lobby or even oil, right? This is all about what's good for some other country.
Yeah.
But they put the screws to you and it works. And there's, entire books have been written about the members of the House of Representatives who've been thrown out by the Israelis. They cross the Israelis and they're gone. People like Paul Finley and Cynthia McKinney and whatever. There's a dozen of them who dared to say, geez, the Israel lobby just dictates policy up here. What's going on? Bam, they're gone. That was what happened to Frank Church, the famous Frank Church from the committee hearings in the 70s. Roger Stone got him for Israel.
Well, I frankly can't understand the administration's position. In the first place, portions of these documents have been leaked to the press. The Congress was put in the demeaning position of having to read about the agreements in the New York Times or the Jack Anderson column. And it's simply intolerable that these agreements should not be made public. The American people are fed to the teeth with secrets, particularly as they relate to international agreements, and it would be in the best interests of all concerned, the best interests of Israel, the best interests of Egypt, and most assuredly the best interests of the United States to bring these documents into the open. That's the purpose of my motion.
Okay, this is a lot. It's really good. But let me shift it because I want to... I just put out this long essay. It's too long for my audience, so I apologize to them already. I've been gone for a while. I came back. But I was really trying to walk through liberal and left and what I think are the mechanisms of empire and this big clash of Israel first and America first. And I think, like everything you said there, I literally don't disagree with a single thing, but I just want to try to frame it for people. And I think what some people who are maybe coming to this party late, like you clearly have been in it. I love watching your stuff, and it's like, an encyclopedia. But people
I admittedly have a chip on my shoulder, right? That's what's going on here. I have
big.
A vendetta because the Israelis played such a large role in lying us into war with Iraq.
Yes.
And I'm not over it. It's still 2002 to me. Let's fight. You know what I mean? That's just how I feel about it.
Yeah, no. And it's like, so I'm going to try to like reel us back in to just take a breath. Because people like Tucker Carlson, amazingly, a guy who like is birthed out of the Fox News world and sitting across from you is kind of like his mind is blown, even hearing very basic sort of challenges to like the mainstream narrative of what happened with all of this. And so the first thing I kind of want to do, and before we get to like the kind of like what was happening behind the scenes, all the covert stuff that you know, and why it's so damn infuriating, and it really is. And clearly now with Epstein, it's like a lot of this is spilling out, and so that's a lot of us are energized. But I want to flip it to that other side of the sort of in quotes noble intentions of the West and this democracy project. People like Bill Kristol, who you've debated and stuff, and the neocons or neoliberals or whoever. So like in that last essay, I thought like a specific question that I've been bringing to people who really, they need an answer for it is something like this. And I agree with your libertarian view of freedom and liberty. I really do. So how is a liberated Middle East, a liberated Saudi Arabia, for example, or Iran, for example, and by that I mean having a government of the people, by the people, for the people, who can control their own resources, sell them in their own currency on a free trade market, the stuff we're all supposed to love, use those profits to uplift their own people, whatever. Like, how is that, a liberated Middle East, a danger to the status quo empire of the sort of American enterprise? Does that make sense? Yeah.
That's a great way to put it. I mean, look at what happens when the wrong guy wins, right? Yeah. In 1993, a bunch of bin Ladenites who just got home from Afghanistan won in Algeria. And Bill Clinton picked up the phone and told the military, you're going to cancel those election results and you are not going to let those people take power, right? Same thing when the wrong guys win in Lebanon. We'll support, any level of machinations and even civil war and truck bombing campaigns and God knows what to make sure that the right guys are in charge there. When George Bush forced the Palestinians to hold an election in 2005 or in 05, and then they held it in 06. Hamas did not win a majority in any single district anywhere in Palestine. They won a plurality. And then the Republicans and the neoconservatives, led by Elliott Abrams, tried to do a coup d'etat and overthrow them. And it backfired in their face. Everyone can read David Rose, The Gaza Bombshell, in Vanity Fair, all about that. And I know Vanity Fair sounds silly or whatever, but David Rose is a decent guy, and it's a great piece. And he even has David Wormser throwing Elliott Abrams under the bus in there, which is really interesting. As you could see, with Iraq, they rigged the elections over and over again during the entire occupation in Iraq to make sure that Maliki always won in agreement with Iran. They'd make like a secret side deal with Iran that we want Maliki to stay instead of the other guys, and all of this kind of thing. So they don't want the wrong guy to win. Democracy means, as we see over and over again, look at Eastern Europe. Democracy means when the people who are going to support Washington's agenda win. And when they don't, we'll do a violent, bloody coup. We'll bring neo-Nazis out in the street. We'll bring suicide bombers out into the street, right? To make sure that our guys are in power, like what's happened in Syria here.
But if I can even sharpen it a little bit there,
sure,
because I can hear my audience chirping about the kind of people who are winning these elections or whatever, and thinking, oh, they're so mad at us, whatever. I'm even trying to flatten that variable, which might be, and this might be sort of a wave of like 1953 Mossadegh. I'm trying to get like away from even people who may have had chips on their shoulders by the 90s or the 2000s for very good reasons, like the same way you and I do. Mm-hmm. Go back to, in the last episode, I was talking about I can't even pronounce it, the Dhofar revolution in Oman of a bunch of feminists. They were Marxists, but feminist Marxists who were trying to, have their own country. Well, the UK got involved and cooed them while working with the mosques to spread lies about them. So it's like, I guess I'm trying to be like, again, so picture a liberated, gender equal, super freedom loving, no America hate stuff, no Islamist stuff, Saudi Arabia.
Right, those things don't go together, right? No, if these people have independence and they have the will of the people, then no, there will not be feminism. There will not be Marxism. And when there were, any kind of leftist or nationalist groups, America always, and Britain always supported the Islamists against them ever since World War II. The best book on that is Devil's Game by Robert Dreyfus, how America helped unleash fundamentalist Islam. Over these decades. It was America that created the Muslim Brotherhood with Saudi Arabia and all this stuff in the first place to undermine the nationalists and the commies in the Cold War.
to keep the resources flowing in the empire's direction, right? I mean, it's just, right.
That's a huge part of it. Yeah. So if you look at, this is the whole thing about Israel, right? If you take Israel out, then what you would have is just this evil, amoral foreign policy, which is about rigging the oil price.
Exactly.
And in the most elementary and idiotic way, by the way, every single person watching this, their whole life has heard presidents, especially right before elections, openly and publicly declare that they are putting pressure on the Saudis to ramp up production and lower the price of oil. So everyone will have a nice summer vacation, is what they usually say. That's to subsidize our economy at their expense. And they openly admit that they use that kind of pressure all along. That'd be about the extent of it, though, right? The oil companies in Houston, they don't give a damn who rules Saudi Arabia or Iran or anywhere else. They'll do business. Even bin Laden himself joked, what am I going to do, drink it? No, the oil is going to be for sale no matter what. So we wouldn't have to really have all this intervention. We just make peace. Now, of course, we have our problems with the Iranians, but we could have solved all that. Again, Israel is what prevents all that. We could have normalized relations with Iran back in the 1990s. No problem there. So Israel is what disrupts all of this. But so what you have in reality right now, the status quo is that America rules the Sunni alliance, right? The Gulf Cooperation Council, all of those sultans and kings and emirs and el presidentes, they all belong to the United States. So that's Saudi, Kuwait, Bahrain, UAE, Qatar, Oman. It was Yemen, but we lost our dictator there. Jordan, Turkey, and then sometimes Iraq, but mostly they're on the Shiite side of the ledger now because of Iraq War II. And that's the other side of the ledger is Iran. And then George Bush gave them Baghdad. So now Iraq ever since 2003. And it was up until last December, Assad in Syria, even though he's an Alawite, they're sort of a break off of the Shiites and close to the Shiites and literally allies with the Iranians. And then Hezbollah in southern Lebanon and the Houthis now in Yemen. That's the other side of the ledger is the Shiite side. And so really the reason that America can't just get along with everybody over there is because of Israel and somewhat Saudi, but that could be resolved. You know what I mean? Like, for example, it was the Saudis that really pressured Obama to help them wage a war against the Houthis after they took power in Yemen in 2015. That wasn't the Israelis as much as it was the Saudis and the UAE that wanted that. But then just a few years later, when they finally ended that stupid war that they never needed to fight in the first place and accomplished nothing other than killing hundreds of thousands of innocent people, which Donald Trump left that war on autopilot for 4 years straight, by the way, and did nothing to curtail it whatsoever, and even vetoed 2 resolutions in the Congress trying to stop it. But at the end of the thing, the Chinese, or was it really the Russians, swooped in and made a peace deal between Saudi and Iran. By the way, when Trump killed Soleimani at Benjamin Netanyahu's behest, why was that? Soleimani was, remember where he killed him? At the Baghdad airport. Why was he in Iraq? Because he was there to meet the Saudis on neutral ground to negotiate. And it was the Americans who killed him at Israel's behest. Killed the guy to prevent Saudi and Iran from making peace. I mean, the whole sectarian civil war here is all because of George Bush. People go, oh, thousands of years. Thousands of years, nothing. W. Bush gave Baghdad to the Shiites for the first time that the Shiites have controlled an Arab capital city for 1,000 years. That's what kicked off the civil war. But they're willing to end that now after 20 years of suicide attacks and airstrikes and all of this stuff and bury the hatchet. Then America could get along with all of them. I cite in my last book, which is most about the Cold War with Russia, but it has a lot of Middle Eastern oil politics in it, of course. I show where Zbigniew Brzezinski and Alexander Haig, who were both anti-Soviet hawks. Of course, Haig was Reagan's Secretary of State, and Brzezinski was to the right of Kissinger, who was Carter's national security advisor, invented the policy of supporting the Mujahideen in Afghanistan, invented the policy of the Carter Doctrine in the Middle East and all that. But by 93, both of them said, we should deal with Iran. We should build an oil pipeline from the Caspian Basin across Iran so that we can start to, warm up relations with them, normalize relations with them, make some money, and have an important infrastructure project in common. Dick Cheney, you might remember, he was the head of Halliburton at the time, repeatedly criticized Bill Clinton for his sanctions against Iran. So we can deal with these people. He said God, for some reason, didn't see fit to make sure to put all the oil under friendly democratic allied nations. Instead, it's in Iran. Oh, well, let's build oil pipelines and do business with these people. We can. They have a very, very flawed republic. Well, guess what? So do we. And so, but whatever, what are we going to do? Drink it? We got to get the energy on the market. What's the problem? And the thing is, you can just see how if they had just taken that tack this whole time, we could have got along with the Ayatollah. The mean, old, scary Ayatollah died in 1989. And by the way, Ronald Reagan sold him missiles through the Israelis. and he died way back then, before the Soviet Union was even gone. We could have been dealing with Khamenei this whole time. And the only reason we can't is because of the Zionists. That's it. They were the ones who put the veto on normalization with Iraq and Iran in the 90s. They were the ones who insisted on the dual containment policy, which meant Bill Clinton had to stay in Saudi to bomb Iraq and contain Iran to balance. See, because America bombed Iraq so bad in the first Iraq war, they weren't powerful enough to balance against Iran anymore. So the Israelis said America has to stay in Saudi to balance against them both. And that was what got us attacked, was doing what Israel wanted instead of what was in the American national interest, even according to the Pentagon. Right, even according to the empire, they said, "Come on, we got to be able to get along with these guys." And then no,
so
foreign government vetoed it.
So it's tricky, because I guess I would want to hear what you think in plain language. There's this like stated mythology of America's role in the world, spreading democracy and freedom and all of that. And I think you and I both, obviously think that's garbage. But everything you just basically laid out there was business. Like, no, we'll do business with anybody. And those two, kind of the mythology versus sort of the let's just do business and be capitalist and maybe isolationist, but just we'll trade with anybody, which might be your preferred sort of view of the world. I'm not sure. They're still seemingly trying to do the balancing act of both. And maybe you're suggesting that's where Israel throws this wrench into it as the in quotes, only democracy in the Middle East, although everyone's rolling their eyes at that quite a bit lately, as maybe this moral cover. Yeah.
Now, so my policy would be total non-interventionism. Right. In other words, if Houston can make a deal to develop oil in some country, great. But if they require Washington's assistance, they can burn in hell forever.
Right.
There should be no foreign policy that is made to bolster any particular U.S. business.
That's
anywhere
great.
In the world.
Can you just give me three
general free trade?
Can you give me like 3 examples of when that's happened off the top of your head? Obviously, like cooing Mossadegh to get the oil back, and that was Britain,
sure.
I guess, right?
Or, yeah. I mean, there's a famous book by Smedley Butler, the Marine Corps general, called "War is a Racket." And there's a famous little quote in there where he talks about, I'm going to get it wrong, but he says, I went to Belize for the textile firms, and I went to Guatemala for the banana companies, and I went to wherever, the Dominican Republic in order for whatever resources, right? And he says, I was just a hitman for Wall Street. That was what I was, a glorified bagman. That's what he says. I was a glorified bagman for these interests. And that the whole thing was a racket. We can add on top of that, since Smedley Butler's day, that you have the merchants of death in the United States, as they used to call them, before all the euphemisms kicked in, the military industrial complex. Now you're supposed to call it the defense industrial base, and you're supposed to love it. Now it's not a conspiracy theory anymore. Now it's the most important thing about America is we stay at war all the time so that we can let these particular weapons firms keep reaching into the treasury to confiscate our tax money. Otherwise, our economy would collapse, they claim, right? Like this is how distorted our economy is by militarism at this point, that they pretend that we need it to keep the engine and everything going, when in fact, all they're doing is confiscating wealth and destroying it, right? They're not reinvesting it in creating goods and services to improve anybody's standard of living. They're, as George Orwell wrote in 1984, they're taking all the excess wealth of the people and they're sinking it in the ocean in the form of a floating fortress. They're blasting it into space in the form of all of their long-range rockets. And so they're taking the wealth so that we can't have it, basically, and squandering it on all these no-win missions. And then, so all this stuff about spreading democracy and America being, the beacon of freedom in the world and whatever. Well, there's 2 things about that. There are mostly like hypocrisy riddled examples in history for them to kind of cherry pick from and say, see, that's all we're doing. And then that becomes like, it really does sustain the mythology and the ideology of American empire, that all we're doing is spreading peace and stability.
They're living off the World War II.
National government. Yeah. The national government prevents conflicts over the Mississippi River, right? The states inside the Union don't fight. So the idea is, well, we'll just expand Washington till it's a world government, and then no one will fight. Everyone who's behind our security umbrella, they don't fight because that could cost them their position behind our security umbrella. So they keep the peace. Europe hasn't broken out in war, as Bill Kristol loves to say. America's kept the peace for 80 years because he's just thinking about, well, France and Germany haven't fought, right? Now, we could have gone to full-scale thermonuclear war in the name of NATO keeping the Soviet Union out of Western Europe, but we didn't, so that's fine. We don't have to worry about even that risk was ever taken, even though we at one point had 70,000 H-bombs, 30 on our side, 40 on theirs, pointed at each other over that contest. And then, of course, he completely omits the 2 million dead in Korea, the 3 to 5 million dead in Vietnam, Laos, and Cambodia, 500,000 dead in Indonesia and East Timor, 500,000 dead in Guatemala, 1 million dead Iraqis, and 500,000 dead Afghans, and on and on and on, 500,000 dead Syrians. Oh, yeah, we kept the peace. Yeah. While we're supporting legions of suicide bombers against Israel's enemies around the Middle East, you know, and somebody like Bill Kristol, he doesn't see the contradiction there at all. Yeah. He's literally just thinking about Europe and how Europe hadn't fought. And it's true, right? That like Hungary and Romania aren't going to have a contest over their border. If they don't like where the border's drawn now, they're going to figure it out because they're not going to jeopardize their position in NATO. So Washington will always cite things like that. Yeah. They always leave out the fact that, but when you bring all of Eastern Europe into NATO, which was founded explicitly for the purpose of being an anti-Russian alliance in the first place, and you expand this alliance directly up to their border, you're causing a war to break out that otherwise would not have. And as I show in my recent book, even Kissinger and Brzezinski and the worst of the NATO expander hawks by 2014 said, man, we have to stop. We should avowedly state we will not bring Ukraine into NATO. Yeah. And for that matter, we won't try to bring in Serbia or Belarus or anybody else. We're going to call a halt. We're going to do like the Austrian model in the Cold War, neutrality for Ukraine. Let it be a bridge between East and West. Let's not have a contest over it. But no, they kept pushing their contest anyway. Hey, we're just spreading stability. Well, now you got 1 million people dead, and Ukraine, what's left of Ukraine is going to be this ridiculous rump state controlled by neo-Nazis and EU and NATO protectorate forever. If the Russians don't end up conquering the entire damn thing at this point. Yeah. So they spread peace and stability, except when they don't. Just like they hold the world at peace with their arsenal of hydrogen bombs until somebody calls their bluff and we all die.
Yeah, that's great. I guess I'm also sort of just thinking. I spend a lot of time looking at post-World War II Africa and those liberation movements, which are some of the clearest and cleanest examples for me of. Everyone knows about Congo and Patrice Lumumba and Kwame Nkrumah in Ghana and other places I've talked about, which are just such clear examples of the U.S. intervening to sort of unplug the project of a genuine sovereignty movement that was non-aligned and all these lovely things that you're sort of talking about. They cashed it out under this Cold War logic. But, I've been telling people there's a lot of ways to cure yourself of this mythology of America is just interested in peace and prosperity and democracy in the world. And I guess why I keep harping on this and I like your answers to this is because, again, I keep going, I seeing the Tucker Carlsons and Candace Owens and Dave Smiths. And I think there's a lot of Americans who had a kind of romantic or still have a romantic, naive mythology of what America is. And maybe are now getting wise to the mechanics of empire. Perhaps it's a moral just disgust of seeing what's on their screens from Gaza, of being like, if this is the cost, I'm out. I have some questions. Perhaps it's Epstein being like, wait, is there really like a deep state underneath all of this? How far back does this go? Should we rethink about 9/11? I mean, I think this is all open now. It's an interesting, crazy time. But I think you muted. Did you mute yourself there, or did I lose your mic?
Yeah, I'm sorry. There's a guy making noise outside.
No, good. It's all good.
Religious questions too, right? Where and this is, I think, the big one is evangelical Christians saying, "Wait a minute, like not only am I changing my mind, but you've been lying to me this whole time, right? Like, the Bible doesn't really say I got to do whatever the Likud says. The guy that wrote the Sermon on the Mount can't possibly be the same guy mandating that I support these people killing children,
Yeah.
invoking the Old Testament, invoking the story of Amalek, or God, the creator of the universe, says you're supposed to kill every last baby in your enemy's community.
Yeah.
That's not what Christians believe.
I mean, but
how can you continue to?
They hit the church. That's right. And a few people are like, wait a minute. It was like, oh, that one got away from us. Sorry, guys. It was like, okay.
Right.
Yeah.
And the other thing is, and this is, I think, the real trick, and they should have known, man, this is high time preference behavior. All these Sunday morning TV news preachers led by John Hagee, the blasphemer atheist who's sure to burn in hell forever if such a thing exists. But he and Robert Tilton and Pat Robertson, too, all of those guys, they promise that if you support the invasion of Iraq, you're going to get raptured up to heaven in your body. Jesus is going to come back. Get it? Middle East, millennium. So they would tell people in church on Sunday, John Hagee, you could get raptured out of this building right now because the George Bush going to Iraq to serve the interests of the Likud at the cost of your son's life. It's all this magic crap. It's all your faith, your deepest, sincere beliefs in Jesus and the afterlife. That's why we have to invade Iraq. But don't worry, then a bunch of magic is going to kick in. It's going to be just like the theology that you read in books that you bought at Walmart, where everybody else gets left behind, but not you, because you had the good, true faith and supported the invasion of Iraq for Israel.
Where will this war lead America, Israel, and the world? Open your Bibles to Ezekiel 38 as we get ready to review something God had to say thousands of years ago that's more current than what you're going to see on Fox News at any time in the future. The war in Iraq is leading to the war described in great detail by Ezekiel in chapters 38 and 39. Listen to me very closely. Remember that Israel and the Jewish people are the apple of God's eye. If something in you resents the Jewish people, that something is not from God. Israel is the center of the universe in the Word of God. Israel was created by a sovereign act of God, and Israel is defended by God. For David said, he that keepeth Israel neither slumbers nor sleeps. Christianity owes a debt of gratitude to the Jewish people who gave the world the Word of God. Every word in the Bible was written by Jewish hands. This is the light of God. One terrorist attack by a plane loaded with explosives into a major refinery in Saudi Arabia, certainly 5 or 6 of them at the same time, would wipe out for 12 to 18 months the energy resources of the Middle East, and the American economy would vaporize. And that's so completely possible that 25 years ago in the Reagan administration, they had a contingency plan for it. I believe the Church of Jesus Christ will be raptured from the earth before this starts. The point I'm making to you today is that I have been teaching this prophetic theme for 45 years. And when I started teaching years ago, when my hair was jet black, people looked at you like you were crazy, saying the last war was going to be in the Middle East. But go further back. When my father taught this, there was no Israel. And the only people in the Middle East were a few people riding camels going across sand dunes. The oil was not a factor. He sounded like an absolute madman saying that was going to happen. Now, here we are, some 50, 60 years later, and all of the dots connect. Jesus Christ could be here this afternoon. There is nothing to delay his coming. I want you to get your eyes not on the cares of this world, but the coming of Jesus Christ.
But then what happened? There was no rapture. No. There was no magic.
I missed it. Yeah.
Jesus didn't come back.
Yeah.
It's been 25 years, and they all got left behind with the rest of us. And so now they're looking at their minister and they're going, actually, like, I don't know if you're a liar or you're just some idiot, but like at best, you're just some idiot. Ted Cruz famously destroyed by Tucker permanently in that interview. He goes, well, my Sunday school teacher said so. Yeah, well, your Sunday school teacher was just your friend Jimmy's mom. She doesn't know anything. She knew more than you then because you were 7 and she was a lady. But, at least in the Catholic tradition, the priests are said to have like this special connection to the divine that you don't, right? But in Protestant churches, like your minister is just Dave. He's just Bob, the minister, who's like read the Bible maybe a little more than you. Maybe he went to school, maybe he didn't, but there's 1,000 schools and they all teach different things. And your Protestant minister doesn't even claim to have a divine insight, right?
Yeah.
He's just some guy doing his best. That's the deal up front. And then, so how could you let a man who is in effect, actually no higher rank than you tell you that you have to support genocide, mass murder, deliberate starvation to death of men, women, and children?
Yeah.
Exploding innocent people to death with high explosives as part of your religion. Like, I could see somebody buying that for a little while, but then they've got to, at one point, like, have an insight one day when they're just taking a shower and thinking about it, or just driving somewhere that, like, wait a minute. Like, how could I let Bob convince me that I have to support killing people to go to heaven?
Yeah.
That's completely stupid and wrong. It's contrary to every other part of my religion.
Yeah.
But Bob, the minister, says, and he learned it from Jimmy's mom, his Sunday school teacher. Like, this is stupid. You could believe in every part of whatever facets of Christian faith. But this part is stupid. That's not your religion. It's a stupid lie that some stupid, evil liar convinced you to believe. So just stop believing it.
Yeah.
You don't have to renounce or abandon any other part of your faith, because this was never part of the Christian religion in the first place. You have to help the Likud kill babies. That's not Christianity. That's politics. That's stupid.
Yeah.
John Hagee is a blasphemer. John Hagee probably doesn't even believe in God at all. John Hagee is probably on tape raping a child.
Well, I don't know John Hagee, but
he's the leader of the Cornerstone Church and Christians United for Israel, and he's a traitor to the United States of America. Look, it's so cynical, man. Yeah. It's just, I'm not a religious guy.
Yeah, me either.
But I mean, imagine what it would take for you to knowingly, cynically manipulate and lie to somebody and exploiting their deepest, most sincerely held faith that they learned from their grandmother. And then you trick them into and use them to help you kill people.
Totally.
And steal.
I've done a bunch of episodes on my personal upbringing and my family and my brother and bar mitzvahs and Zionism's role in it. And I find it sinister is the word I use all the time of, like, it's so gross to, like, take this kind of nice thing people want to do and have them participate in this thing and get them so deep that now they're just silent about it. Because
part of it too is, Jay, that I think people, they really don't recognize this. And honestly, you know what it is more than anything else, especially among the older people. They're not on Twitter or whatever. They can't see it all day. Yeah. They might hear a little bit about it from people they can't really identify with. But I think it's just your basic cognitive dissonance based on the ignorance of it, where, I love talking about this. I'll never forget this. There was a guy who said to me riding in my cab in 2003, right before the war. And he goes, but if Saddam didn't attack us, then why are we attacking him then?
Yeah.
Right. That's crazy. The cab driver says that the president knows that Saddam didn't have anything to do with it, but he's attacking him anyway. That's crazy. Yeah. The cab driver's a kook and the president's telling the truth, because how could it be the other way around? It just couldn't be. Right. And so, and the guy who told me that, I remember, was like a wealthy, successful, accomplished man about town. Right. He was the kind of person who sort of had to feel that way to fit in his part of the society, right?
So,
whereas if he had been more of a scumbag like me, he wouldn't have felt so beholden to the narrative.
You're not so bad, Scott.
Well, whatever.
I know what you mean.
I was just driving a cab at the time, so me and all my bartender friends, we didn't believe in it because we didn't need to, right? Where like real estate boy needed to, because he's surrounded by believers all day in his business, right? We have to do, so it's the same thing with Israel. If Israel is this like absolutely brutal, barbarian, Oriental society that shares no Western values whatsoever, they spit on Christians and bomb their churches, then how come we're supporting them then? Well, if all they do is deliberately shoot toddlers in the head all day because they think it's funny.
Yeah.
And they wear shirts with a target on a pregnant woman's belly that say 1 shot, 2 kills, because they're just the goyim, which means it's the same thing as the N-word, right? It means they're gooks. It means you can kill them and it's fine. Then if that's true, that Israel is by far the most evil regime on the planet and make the Chicoms look like angels, then how come we love them so much? How come my minister says that I'm their slave and I have to do whatever they say?
Yeah.
How come America, the land of truth and justice and freedom and liberty and independence, would be beholden to something that is an Eastern Oriental barbarian society that absolutely rejects Western values in every single way? Well, I mean, never mind the last 2 years of bombing. They've held these people in utter slavery for longer than the Soviets occupied Eastern Europe.
Yeah.
Since 10 years before I was born. And I just turned 49.
Well, let me
9 years before I was born.
Let me try to respond to some of that, or just put things on your plate. While you were talking, I think it was called "Why We Fight." There was an amazing documentary. You may remember the scene. Do you remember this guy? Maybe he was a cab driver in New York whose son signed up for the military after 9/11.
Yes, I do. He's a police officer. I remember exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah, it's the same story. Maybe I'll put a link to it or a clip of it.
Yeah, he says he saw Bush on TV say, "I never said that Iraq had anything to do with 9/11." And he goes, "What?"
Yeah, and he's like, "What?"
Yeah, you did.
Yeah.
Somebody had to pay for this. Somebody had to pay for 9/11. I want enemy dead. I want to see their bodies stacked up for what they did, for taking my son.
If war is forced upon us, we will fight with the full force and might of the United States military, and we will prevail.
Evidence from intelligence sources, secret communications, and statements by people now in custody reveal that Saddam Hussein aids and protects terrorists, including members of Al-Qaeda.
I remembered when I was in Vietnam, we used to get requests, can you put my father, my son's name on the side of the helicopter? Can you put it on a rocket? I said, you know what? That's a good idea. I'm going to do that. I'm going to try to do that. So I sent out emails to the Secretary of all the Armed Forces. I'm a retired New York City Police Department sergeant and a proud Vietnam veteran. I lost my son on 9/11. I can't tell you in words what his loss means to me. I would respectfully request if you could put his name on some piece of armament in the Iraq war. You know, we haven't caught bin Laden, but, you know, let's do something here. Who was responsible? Come on, let's hit him. Iraq was responsible. Good, let's go. You say Iraq? Let's go. Let's get in there. Let's kick the hell out of them.
Forced to clarify yesterday.
We've had no evidence that Saddam Hussein was involved with the September the 11th. Now, what the vice president said was that he had...
What did he just say?
Al-Qaeda.
I mean, I almost jumped out of the chair. I don't know where people got the idea that I connected Iraq to 9/11. Was he nuts or what? What the hell did we go in there for? We're getting back for 9/11. Well, if he didn't have anything to do with 9/11, why are we going in there? I was mad. I was mad. My first thought is, you know, you're a liar. I'm from the old school. Certain people walk on water. And President of the United States is one of them. If I can't trust the President of the United States, I don't know. It's a terrible thing when American citizens can't trust their president. You begin to wonder, what the hell is with the whole system? There's something wrong with the entire system. The government exploited my feelings of patriotism. of a deep desire for revenge for what happened to my son. But I was so insane with wanting to get even, I was willing to believe anything. Undoubtedly, there are people who may listen to my statements and think that I'm no good, that I'm an SOB, I'm a warmonger, I'm this, I'm that, whatever. I should never put my son's name on it. I should be ashamed that I put my son's name on it. Am I sorry I asked for my son's name to be put on the bomb? No, because I acted under the conditions at that time. Was it wrong? Yeah, it was wrong, but I didn't know that. So, is it regrettable?
Yeah. It's an amazing moment, and I feel like we still haven't kind of gotten over it. So I do want to get to the question of, because what you were hinting at there, which I really, really, really like, and I did again in this long essay, is if there's an authoritarian sort of gatekeeping system that is telling you something, and even if you think it's untrue, but you or they're hiding some truth for you, but you trust that hiding is some sort of a noble lie, that they have your best interest in mind, really, and that's kind of why you can't know the whole truth. That's a perfect description of a lot of religious ideology, where God is this benevolent figure who just kind of can't know the whole script, but you just have to trust in faith that he's loving you. Well, if that's the state and media and whatever else, so, whether that's Epstein or something of like, we know the people, Ben Shapiro, whoever else, are like, just stop looking. And that might just be because they're afraid that what we're going to find, their precious Israel, is sort of all over this stuff. But it's like, okay, I know my government's lying to me, but I trust that it's benevolent. I trust that behind the scenes, they have my best interest in mind. I think that's the liberal mentality, and it has been for quite a long time. That seems to be the part that's fraying and falling away. For much of the stuff you just said, maybe just the horror of like, I'm not on board with the target. Like I'm not supporting this anymore. Phone down. Morally, I'm out. Tell me the truth or leave me alone, or I'm going to come get you, whatever is happening next in America. Or it's something else, because so there's only one part of sort of your perspective that I feel like I just need to push back on. And it's the part of, I need to ask you a question of what you know about this, because I'm going to be doing some shows on this later. But it's the part where you keep saying sort of like the military industrial complex, or I haven't heard the word that you used for it, the military base, global base, or whatever we're supposed to use.
Defense industrial base.
Whatever.
That's the new term.
Sounds great to me. But like that's
what its proponents call it.
Yeah, that system, or something about, just so people have the clear idea of, when you're talking about coups and whatever else of American interest, is like, it's not like it's not old-fashioned imperialism and colonialism. It's more like, just get our guy in there. We don't care if he's a brutal dictator, as long as he keeps the contracts open to us, which should be the cure of like, America's not interested in democracy. They just want a cheap deal. Like if the guy starts raising the prices because he wants to sell it in his own currency or something. So I guess what I want to put on your plate is when you say like the economy will collapse if we don't keep this machine going. I'm saying that's what they claim. Okay, so I think so. My question to you is, sure, I'm not sure that they're wrong. This doesn't excuse it at all. Of course, in some ways, I'm like, has the empire? Maybe this is the question for you. Has the empire and the mechanics of the empire turned into a kind of Frankenstein monster that nobody knows how to turn off at this point, even if we could, yes, without a literal like. There's something else. Sorry, this is a rambling question, but there's something else that like young kids probably figure of like, hey, if you spend more money than you sell stuff to get money, you're going to go broke. And then you learn about America, and just as like a really dumb, basic kid, you're like the debt is rising. Like, so we're spending more and we don't make anything anymore. Like, shouldn't we all be going broke? And like, they're like, oh, it's really complicated. You don't understand the economy. And then we all just convince ourselves like, yeah, I guess I don't understand it, and shrug and go about your day. But like, you weren't kind of wrong, but you of course have to understand fiat currency, and you're a Ron Paul guy. So of course you know all the history of this. But I do think if you start to understand some of that stuff, and I am going to do some future shows on it, you start to get this picture of like, holy shit, we've made a ticking time bomb of interest and debt or whatever, and we've figured out some kind of way to export the inflation pressure to a certain degree. It's starting to come home a little, that if this blows up, like if BRICS has their own currency, or a liberated Saudi Arabia is like, we're done giving you that sweetheart deal on the oil, it does cause hyperinflation the next day in America. And you do, which again, like, great, if that's how the empire has to fall, the empire has to fall. But that's my kind of question to you of like, is it a monster that's gotten out of control that no one even knows how to turn off anymore?
Well, I mean, on that part, yes. But by no one, I mean, people anywhere near power.
Okay.
Right. But I mean, if I was the president, I would repudiate the entire national debt. If you invested in U.S. government treasuries, tough, jump out a window, you idiot.
Yeah.
You have blood on your hands
anyway.
You're
that to
guilty
foreign governments
anyway.
Too, who've been.
Yes, all of them especially should burn in hell. Them. Anyone invested in U.S. government debt, sorry, the national debt is now zero, and the empire is abolished. We're closing every single military base outside of American borders in the world, anywhere, and we're coming home. And we're going to save $2 trillion a year on imperialism, and all those factories that were making weapons of death and destruction for no good reason, but for this fool's errand of global dominance, all those factories will be bought up in bankruptcy court and will be put to productive use. You know, after World War II, everybody came home. There was no Great Depression. They slashed government spending by like 3/4, fired the entire army, and everybody went to work. It was a giant boom. It was FDR that prolonged the Depression for 15 years. The Depression, David Stockman wrote this great book, The Great Deformation, which is, he was Reagan's budget director. He's a libertarian type like me, hardcore anti-imperialist. And the Great Deformation is the militarism of the American empire ever since World War II. And he talks about how it's completely deformed the entire American economy and disrupted it in the way exactly as you're talking about. Like, boy, if there's a snapback coming, it's going to be severe, because we've all those little bubbles that have popped. Those are little bubbles on top of the one big bubble and all that. But he's the same guy. I'll get right back to that in 1 second. But he's the same guy who says to me, he goes, look, dude, like, and he really is the expert's expert on this, man. You should talk to him. He's brilliant. He goes, let me tell you something, okay? The Great Depression was over before FDR was ever inaugurated in March of 1933. It was over. What happened? The Federal Reserve of New York had created a giant bubble because they were propping up the British pound. Benjamin Strong was doing a favor for his mentor, Montague Norman, in England. And so debased the American currency to prop up the pound. And that led to a stock market bubble. I mean, there had been inflation all through the 20s, but this is just 27 through 29. The last couple of years there created this big bubble in the stock market, and then it crashed. But so what? Liquidate the bad debts, go to bankruptcy court, buy up what's good, and go. Now, there was the Dust Bowl, which was also the government's fault from their land use policies and everything, the tragedy of the commons that they had forced on the people of the Great Plains. And so there were other problems. They also, before FDR ever got there, idiot Hoover put floors on wages, raised income taxes through the roof, put the Smoot-Hawley tariff and all these absolute idiot progressive policies. They pretend that Herbert Hoover was Ron Paul, the free market, laissez-faire guy. No, he wasn't. He was a liberal, progressive Republican, because that's how they were then. And all FDR did was quadruple. That's why it's not called the FDR Dam. It's called the Hoover Dam. It's not called the laissez-faire free market capitalism built this dam. It's the national government confiscated people's wealth and built it, is what happened, as a giant public works project. And all of that stuff came from Hoover before FDR ever got there. But still, the Depression was over. And FDR just hired a bunch of insane lunatics to just experiment and tinker and issue all kinds of insane restrictions and regulations on business. They called this regime uncertainty, where basically anybody who had any capital just sat on it, because nobody knew what FDR was going to do the next day. He's persecuting people all over the place. So through the regime uncertainty and all the regulations and everything, they succeeded in prolonging the Depression all the way through the 1930s and until they could get us into the World War. But then after the war ended, they cut back a whole bunch of the New Deal. In fact, they had begun to cut back a bunch of the New Deal stuff even before the war because none of it was working. It was horrible. And then when they came home from the war and they slashed all that government spending, that just meant all that capital was freed to go into actual businesses that produce goods and services to improve people's quality of life and standard of living. And so everything was just gone up. So now, fast forward to today, I'm in charge. David Stockman's my treasury director, and we repudiate the debt and abolish the empire. Yeah, and we fire 99% of the national government's employees and make them go get real jobs. Yeah, we'd have a severe recession for about 6 months. The problem is government is confiscating all that wealth and destroying it. Stop that. Regime uncertainty, what's the opposite of that? Regime certainty. Your property rights will be respected. Go ahead and invest. All we need is freedom. We don't need any of this stuff. And think about the threat. Think of how silly it is just on the face of it. If we don't take the money out of your bank account and turn it into the wing of an airplane that's used to deliver high explosives to destroy property elsewhere, then we'll go broke.
Yeah.
As compared to, say, for example, if you took that money and you invested it in a company that was going to buy a tractor with it and then use that tractor to pull up plants and feed you and your neighborhood with those plants, right? No, we have to turn your wealth into explosives.
Yeah.
That are one use objects, single use objects, and achieve a net destruction of property every time they're used. How does that make sense?
Well,
that we'd be wealthier being forced to make engines and tools of destruction as opposed to regular capitalistic goods and services that people invest in so that they can turn a profit on.
Yeah.
So I just think have faith in freedom, man. That's the only thing you need to believe in is that chaos works.
Yeah. Well,
it's just like Osama bin Laden said, what am I going to do? Drink it? The oil's going to be for sale.
Yeah.
The cars and trucks are going to be for sale. You don't need the government to intervene in any of that. If they are intervening, they're doing it. Why? Because somebody lobbied them to screw somebody else over for their advantage. As Ross Perot would say, special interests, meaning narrow interests at the expense of everybody else.
Yeah.
So just, you know what? Let's just repeal every law passed since 1791. Keep the U.S. Constitution. Maybe whatever regulation they pass over who controls the Mississippi or whatever. And then we just leave it at that. We don't need these people at all. We just don't.
Well, I did 3 shows on anarchy, so I'm all on board. We probably have a lot more in common than you think, and a lot more faith in that. But
read some Rothbard. You're going to move to the right. You're going to be a property rights guy.
Well, the anarchy. There's this. It's a big tent. I think anarchy is an adjective, not a noun. So there's a lot of anarchistic thought to be had there. But with the, I think it was pretty clear with your vision of how to get there. There's a million incentives that of course it would never happen in the site because it would be a pretty big problem in the immediate, or it would be a massive shock for people, which is why I guess I'm saying it is a monster that nobody knows how to turn off.
Well, except that what you said was, I think. When you talk about the crack up boom and hyperinflation destroying the economy and everything, that ain't going to come from ending the empire. That's the road we're on right
absolutely.
now.
No. It's a slow nozzle that is a ticking time bomb. It's happening.
Right.
It's happening, and they can't stop it. I mean, I am going to do some shows that are just about interest and debt and fiat currency. I mean, these are the kind of things that, like, let me just cards on the table. I said, 9/11 happened when I was a sophomore. I was part of the at the time the largest protest in human history, which was to not go to war in Iraq, which of course we were ignored, and we went there under and still the chip on your shoulder is still the chip on my shoulder. And I started this Epstein thing. When people are like, "Holy shit, we're talking about Monica Lewinsky again," it's like, yeah, we're going back, and like we're reassessing a lot of this stuff. And like I said, I don't know if that's just because of the hypocrisy has gotten too much, right? Israel, the most moral army in the world, we have to support them. All the stuff you said about Christianity. There's a million ways that the hypocrisy or just the moral outrage of like, this is starvation on my phone. I know what that looks like. I'm not okay with it. Stop telling me this is necessary collateral damage for some life that you're giving me while I'm just scrolling Instagram and bored out of my mind anyway. Like, I'm out for a million reasons. So I have a book that's kind of coming out on that, about cognitive dissonance, actually, called The Insufficient Rewards. So there is a shakeup, and a lot of people are reassessing this thing. But my in those days of coming of age after college and 9/11 hit, and I have questions, and I'm living in New York and I'm asking these questions, I think it's the first time I first learned of the Federal Reserve and got exposed to, books about Jekyll Island and understanding these currencies. And you said something at the top of this conversation, which is crucially important, that there are conspiracy theories, sure, and then there are just plain old incentives and mechanisms of empire, which are readily explainable, discoverable, understandable, with extremely perverse outcomes. So the only thing I keep wanting to sort of push back, and I might just not understand it as much,
sure, go ahead,
is the sort of like the arguments of, and I think I guess the question that I still haven't quite gotten your opinion on is, has Israel, do they know that they're vulnerable in this empire position where they are actually, their interests aren't aligned with America's anymore, no matter how much they say it?
I think so, yeah.
You think, and so, and out of maybe a paranoia, they've maybe engaged in blackmail or engaged in this position where they're now trying to lead the blind man. There was a New York Times cartoon that somehow got called anti-Semitic and then stopped all the cartoons in the New York Times like 8 years ago, and I freaked out because I hate charges of anti-Semitism, where it was Donald Trump as a blind man. I don't know if you remember it, walking a dog that was Netanyahu, and somehow he was wearing a yarmulke, and they thought this was anti-Semitic. But I was like, this is an interesting conversation in the commentary that they were trying to do. I'll put it on the screen because I don't care who thinks it's anti-Semitic.
My take on Israel has always been, for a very long time, that essentially they just operate with a very high time preference, right? As the Austrian economists talk about. I don't know if the other economists, but they want what they want right now, and the consequences for even the medium-term future be damned.
Yeah.
So, for example, they keep bombing Christians in Gaza. They're slightly less than a fifth of the population, something like that. They could just try a little harder not to hit Catholic churches. They keep hitting them anyway. They hit a church and killed former Congressman Justin Amash's family at a church there. They bombed a church last week, and you got right-wingers just saying, enough of this, man.
Yeah.
And so I think their attitude is whatever resentment is caused by their policies in the United States, that we'll just take care of that later.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah,
it's better to ask for forgiveness than permission. We just do whatever we want. And, you're probably familiar with this secretly recorded video, kind of candidly recorded video of Netanyahu at a settler's home in the year 2000, where he's describing how he got over on Bill Clinton and how he lied to Bill Clinton at Y River and told him, we're going along with the two-state solution thing, but I get to define Area C, and I say Area C is everything. Yeah. I screwed Bill Clinton right in the face, and he couldn't do nothing about it. And the settler lady says, yeah, but Bibi, geez, aren't you a little worried about using and abusing the Americans like this? What if they get pissed off, And he goes, let me tell you something, all right? America is a thing that is easily moved.
Yeah.
80% of them support us. It's absurd.
שהמחיר יהיה כבד מצום, כרגע המחיר לא כבד מצום, התקפה רבת היקף ברשות הפלסטינית. תגיד על הפחד שהכל מתמוטט.
ואז, רגע, אבל אז השוק העולם יגיד מה, אתם כובשים? אתה לא מפחד מהעולם, ביבי.
במיוחד היום עם אמריקה, אני יודע מה זה אמריקה. אמריקה זה דבר שאפשר להזיז אותו בקלות, להזיז לכיוון הנכון.
הם אומרים שהם בעדינו, אבל כאילו...
לא יחמיאו לנו.
שאני עושים איזה משהו, אז הם...
יש עליה, נניח שהם אומרים משהו, אז אמרו, 80% מהאמריקאים תומכים בה. זה אבסורד, יש לנו שם תמיכה כזאת, ואנחנו אומרים מה נעשה עם הממשל הוא היה פרו-פלסטיני בצורה קיצונית. לא פחדתי להתעמת שם, לא פחדתי להתעמת עם קלינטון, לא פחדתי להתעמת עם החוק. בלאו הכי את המחיר הבינלאומי אני משלם, אז עדיף לי כבר לקבל תמורה.
Mocking us. Yeah. Mocking your audience's ministers tell their flock to follow and obey this scum, this criminal, murderer. And he's just laughing. And that's their attitude, is that the American people, we're just like Palestinians. As Henry Kissinger said about military men, they're just big, dumb animals to be used in foreign policy. That's what America is. America's a big ranch where Israel grows soldiers to be useful to fight their wars for them. Yeah. And they have as much respect for us as they do for a goat or a dead Palestinian baby. None. They'll use us and abuse us. And if America falls, they don't give a damn. They just move on to China, go back and start sucking up to the Russians again. But blackmail the president of France.
Yeah, I mean, I think that energy that you're displaying is interesting. Here are more cards on the table for you. You know, I was part of the Occupy kids down at Occupy Wall Street, and it was an exciting time. It was leftists, libertarians, all kinds of people there who were just pissed. I always like these moments where you kind of get your guy into office, and then you're disillusioned and you start to see through the myth a little bit, right? Yeah. So that was a bunch of people who voted for Obama because they hated George W. Bush so much for the bank bailouts, and then Obama kept doing them, and they're like, wait, something's rotten in the system. Right. I'm going on the streets. And it seems to be, I don't know if it's there yet. I've always said when these Trump kids and the Occupy kids realize we have much more in common, if we figure out what's rotten with the system, and there's a lot together, something really might change. And it does feel like a little moment here. It might be the Epstein thing because pedophilia, and like that's just it's too crazy. Like they can't go there, and I don't know what's going to come out of it. And then Israel being behind it, so that energy that you're bringing of like this damn foreign country is doing this thing. But I keep having to. I guess that my one I fear what's coming is a moment where, and I don't think anybody will do this so openly, where somebody levels with the American people, being like, listen, we've been doing this stuff, all this covert stuff, and it's really ugly. We've been the Jack Nicholson character from A Few Good Men. I always go to that scene of, you can't handle the truth. You want me on that wall. That's kind of the oh shit, I guess I don't want to know what happens in the dark in Ghana or Africa. I don't want to know what you did to Patrice Lumumba's body. Yeah. Just keep me happy and safe here in America, and don't tell me what you're really up to over there. But now I'm seeing it on my phone, and you got to tell me. Because look, Epstein came out. Were you doing this? You're starving kids in Gaza. You're doing this. You're a part of this. And if somebody really levels with the American people, this is never going to happen. But in a presidential election, and be like, listen, we've been doing a lot of this stuff. You want to know about it? We'll tell you about it. We've been doing a lot of this stuff, and we're in pretty deep. We're really in deep. Because the Nixon shock, we could go through what we did with getting rid of the gold standard and everything. And we've spent all this money already. We really have. That's the debt. We've spent it all already. And we're doing all this to make sure, we're making some bastards rich in other countries, the House of Saud and this person over there, or this person there. But they're giving us a really good deal that if they have a popular revolution in their country that's democratic, a true Arab Spring or something, that deal's going to go away, because we are colonialism really never ended. We're still getting a great deal, and that's what's keeping the dollar in your pocket kind of floating. And listen, I know that's effed up, everybody, but we don't know how to turn it off. And if that's right in any regard of what I said, to bring in economics into the empire and how we're stuck with this situation, it's perverse. We're being blackmailed, whatever. But I don't know, and you tell me as a libertarian who's a little closer to someone in those circles. As a libertarian, obviously, you're out on the whole thing, but I don't know how many Americans are like, cool, keep it going. I don't want to know. America first means kill the rest of the world. Man. So that's, you get my question, to an end. Right? Yeah.
I mean, they always say, oh, war's good for the economy.
Yeah.
Well, no, it's not. Look at us now. We've been at war this whole time.
Yeah. And your
war is good for people who invest in Lockheed. War is at the expense of the American people. As Garrett Garrett said, everything goes out, nothing comes back.
Yeah.
So, you can talk about how the empire is, we hold a gun to these countries' heads and force them to trade in dollars to prop up the dollar.
Yeah.
Well, the empire is also the reason that every other country in the world is racing away from the dollar and trying to join up with the BRICS, trying to use their own currencies in their international exchanges just to boycott us and freeze us out. It's what's making the whole world hate us and turn against us. So we just abandoned the empire and had the strongest currency. We wouldn't have to force them to use our currency. They would want to use our currency, because $100 bills in the vault are as good as a brick of gold.
Yeah.
If they are, if they aren't, then they aren't. Yeah. And it's the empire that destroys the currency. That's why they have to print the money and debase the money supply, is because they can't raise our taxes to pay for all this, but we would refuse to pay for it. It would be too obviously at our expense, not to our benefit. So I think the only place we really differ here, I think, is you are more afraid of what would happen if we rip the Band-Aid off, I don't think it'd be a problem at all.
I mean, it might be a problem, but I'm ready for it. I think it's going to be a massive, violent shakeup, but I think it's inevitable, and so let's get it over with and start. Yeah. I mean, that's why I want to have these conversations.
Well, I'm looking at it like. Yeah. I got homeless people everywhere.
Yeah, man. Dude,
I want those homeless people to be former government employees who all got fired, and now let them live in the woods. Yeah. Let them and watch their babies freeze and go hungry. Well, they are the enemies of everyone else in this country.
We're going to have to watch. They deserve to suffer. We're going to have to watch out. I hear you, but we're going to have to watch out for some of that vengeance, because that can we know from history that revolutions can turn vengeful in a way. It's going to be tough, dude. I'm with you.
I'm just saying, let them live outside and let them cry about it.
I am with you. It's like, we really don't disagree, and I don't live in America.
Hey, listen,
anymore.
I know, and look, the only reason I say that too is because there are thousands of people living in the woods within 100 miles of me right now. Okay.
Yeah.
There are people who, because of the government's war against us, can no longer afford their rent.
Let me share something. I'm with you.
Someone did that to them. Those are the people who should have to pay.
Yeah. Let me share something with you that I did in that last one too, just quickly, because I think it's interesting, and so much history, and because I think we're there. We're going to live through this massive shakeup, right? Like this is untenable. I keep saying I'm going to do these episodes where just mathematically this is going to break. The interest and debt on a fiat, how it works, is a ticking time bomb, and it's going to go off in our lifetime. If you're just the president for 4 years and you were 30 years ago, you didn't matter. You just printed the money. Good for you. Because war is not good for the economy. But if you do it in such a way and you get another place desperately taking out loans and buying dollars, it's not good for the economy. It's delaying the inflation a tiny, tiny bit. So that's the best you could do. Like if Americans have been fooled to think that's good economics, like, God bless you. But so for a place like, I kept mentioning Africa that I'm so interested in. I've spent some time in Ghana and I really like it. And I did this comparison. It's kind of unfair, but looking at Ghana and Iran after World War II, totally different countries, right? But countries that are caught kind of in the global South-ish kind of thing, on the wrong side of an exploitative relationship with European powers and big powers, whatever, and having their own sovereignty movements of like, okay, we're done with that. Ghana gets independence in 1957. Mossadegh gets elected in 1951, around the same kind of time. And this is an interesting thing for your Christian thing. So, they both, Mossadegh and Nkrumah, have some commonalities of basically being like, hey, we're kicking out all these foreign companies who've been exploiting us forever. We're going to nationalize our stuff, whatever it is, sell it on the world market at a fair price, use the profits to uplift our own people, all this lovely stuff, right? This America first stuff, but Ghana first, Iran first, for their own people. Of course, they get labeled communist and socialist and Marxist, even though they both kind of hated the communists. They both get cooed by the West and get booted out. And then we get puppets in there, the Shah in Iran. And then in Ghana, you get a series of sort of pseudo-democratically elected puppets who are Western friendly. And they go on and on. Fast forward that, you get the Islamic Revolution, as we know, in 1979 in Iran. And we have the kind of situation we have now. They're angry at Israel as an outpost of that entire project. I think rightfully so. And we have this, in quotes, problem of a very violent, and I don't love anything about that regime, okay? And in Ghana, what do you have? You don't have that. They're not threatening people in this massive way, but they're getting really upset about what we talked about. They had an IMF loan of $13 billion or something they couldn't pay back. It was forgiven, but at massive austerity, where all of those public things that they fought for in their independence were given back to, the story. They're in the streets now. So there's places like Ghana that majority Christian, so we could talk about the Islam variable, whatever it is. It doesn't really matter to me in that scenario about freedom and liberty. The anger is there, and the system is screwing both of them, and it's bubbling in certain ways. This is all kind of coming to a head, and in a way, and this is, I want you to talk about more of your expertise on sort of the why they hate us question, because I look at those two countries, and again, you know, the people that I used to work with and be close to who are obsessed with the evils of Islam and all this stuff. And I'm like, you know, there's something in that story that almost makes the defiance or whatever of Islam versus maybe the passivity of Christianity in Ghana as, you know, as just a, maybe a more fierce kind of resistance to this that doesn't cast it as some sort of, you know, evil, just they hate freedom and this kind of stuff. Like it is it's a variable that I can recognize in the trajectory of post World War II countries that is difficult for people to swallow. And I want you to answer the question, why do they hate us? Because I've been surrounded by people who say, well, they're telling us why they hate us. That New Orleans driver down the street was saying, I want to separate the believers from the unbelievers. But I think psychologically, of course, everyone needs to develop a belief and a cover story and a mythology to do some terrible things. But your motivations are not so simple as just this religion in your head or this ideology in your head or what George Bush said. Well, so, yeah, if you could respond. Look,
Sam Harris is a liar, right? Sam Harris, you notice he doesn't attack Jews for believing in this cult of Yahweh who says it's okay to murder men, women, and children all day. No. Why not? Well, because he's an agent of Zion. He's here because he hates Christians and he hates Muslims. But for some reason, he doesn't hate the people who invented this ridiculous religion in the first place.
Well, I could tell you, just to be fair.
But yeah, the God that created the whole universe wants this one tribe to murder every last baby of this other tribe. That's just some silly cult. All of it is some silly cult.
I'm with you.
Yahweh was just quickly, one of a group of gods that a bunch of kooks made up.
Just quickly before
and he
before
still
you
isn't real.
No, just quickly before you respond, just to be fair to him, even though I have no love lost for him at the moment, is I know his moral philosophy is so hell-bent on utilitarianism and sort of trolley problem that he's decided that Islam and Islamism and jihadism is just such a massive problem that basically anything else you put on the ledger is just a necessary means to an end.
Like I'm saying, he's a liar.
Yeah, I mean, I'm with you.
Islam's only a problem for us because of Israel.
Right. So explain
Otherwise,
that.
we get along just fine with Saddam Hussein, get along just fine with the Ayatollah, get along with everybody.
Yeah.
Israel is the problem. And I don't mean Judaism. I mean the Likud.
Yeah.
The project to create a greater Israel at the expense of the Muslims and Christians of the region. And so, yeah, of course, it's the agenda of the Likud to try and Harris, obviously acting as at least their de facto agent. Mm-hmm. His job is to lie to and manipulate Americans to get them to hate and fear Muslims so that the U.S. government will have an easier time helping the Israelis murder Palestinians and steal their property. That's what it's all about.
Yeah.
And so that's it. Why do they hate us? Who's they?
Yeah.
Ronald Reagan and George Bush and Bill Clinton's mercenaries. They isn't the Muslims. They is the Bin Ladenites.
Yeah,
a few thousand extremist fighters cultivated by Saudi intelligence working for America and Britain. That's they. Why do they hate us? Because Bill Clinton bombed Iraq from bases in Saudi Arabia, and he helped Rabin and Perez and Netanyahu and Barack murder innocent men, women, and children in Palestine and Lebanon.
Yeah.
That's why. Only liars say otherwise. Anyone who knows the first thing about Al-Qaeda at all will tell you that's exactly what they said.
Yeah.
Remember the comedian David Cross? He had a thing in 2002 where he goes, yeah, man, they say, he goes, what is this country full of elementary school kids? They tell us, they hate us because we're free. They hate us because we're free. Because no, they don't. They hate us because of our bases in Saudi Arabia and our support for Israel. Oh, how do you know that, David? Because that's what he fucking said.
Seriously, if the terrorists hated freedom, then the Netherlands would be fucking dust, you know? As would Denmark and Sweden and Switzerland and New Zealand and Canada and every other country that's truly freer than we are. But it's true. And I don't think Osama bin Laden sent those planes in to attack us because he hated our freedom. I think he did it because of our support for Israel and our ties with the Saudi family and all our military bases in Saudi Arabia. You know why I think that? Because that's what he fucking said. Are we a nation of 6-year-olds? Answer, yes. God damn it. Why did the bad man put the plane in the building? Because he hated freedom. No, because I went to the Nexus Lexus database and there's over 1,400 articles that actually explain why. Shh, he hated freedom. Have a cookie. Have a cookie. Get him in the backyard. Show him the outdoor pool. All right.
Only a liar would say they hate us because we're free.
Yeah.
Why did George Bush say they hate? He said the Taliban did it.
Yeah.
The Taliban, a bunch of cavemen from Kandahar province, from the town of Bedrock. They did it because they hate it because that you love your mama. Oh, yeah, right. These were Egyptians and Saudi mercenaries who worked for America, who turned on America because they hated American foreign policy.
Yeah.
Simple as that. You know, there's this great book they put out in 2010 called Who Speaks for Islam? That was the Gallup poll. And they went and surveyed people in as many Muslim countries as they could get access to anyway. And everybody loves America and everybody loves Americans. They just hate Bill Clinton and George Bush and their men for killing them and stealing their stuff.
Yeah. I think
they're not collectivists the way Americans are collectivists.
Yeah.
They don't hold us responsible for what our government does. You can read the polls. It's a really good book. It's called Who Speaks for Islam by Moga Head is the lady's name. One of the co-authors is Moga Head. It's a really great book. And they don't hate you and me. They don't hate Jews. They don't hate Christians. They don't hate white people. They don't hate North Americans. They hate the U.S. government. Well, guess what? I do too.
Yeah.
And why? Because they're evil. Because they're thieves. Because they're liars. Well, who's actually on the receiving end of all that violence? They are.
Yeah. I think people
that's why they hate us. Because America's the world empire, the evil empire.
I think people underestimate these numbers. There's a real Orientalism of being, you hear like a million dead Iranians in the Iran-Iraq war or whatever. And it's like in every town, there's a graveyard of martyrs who were killed in that war. I mean, in crazy numbers. And they know America was supporting Saddam.
I had the great opportunity to go to Iran with a public television TV crew to make a show. People ask me, why are you going to Iran? And I thought about it. Why am I going to Iran? And it occurred to me, I'm going here because I think it's good character to know people before you bomb them. Sometimes we have to kill people, but it should hurt. And it is a nation's inclination to dehumanize its enemies before we go kill them. So I went to Iran. It occurred to me when I was in Iran, I was afraid to go here. And when I got there, I was so glad I had the courage to go there. And I learned once again that fear, and there's a lot of it in our society, fear is, to me, for people who don't get out very much. Now, when you go to Iran, it's a thriving country of 70 million people. I want to know what makes them tick. I'm in their capital city, Tehran, with about 12 million people, and there's a veneer of hatred there. I mean, look at the banner there. It's an 8-story tall American flag made out of dropping bombs and skulls for stars and stripes, saying "Down with America." And we've all heard about death to America and so on. I was in a taxi in that traffic jam there later on that day. It was just silent, and suddenly my driver just bursts out, "Death to traffic." And I thought, no, wait a minute. I thought it was death to Israel or death to America. He said, right now it's death to traffic. And I said, well, what's with that? And he said, here in Iran, anytime something's frustrating to us and out of our control, we say death to that. And I thought about that. I thought, boy, I'm so glad I'm here to understand this with a little more sophistication than a bumper sticker. So he speaks Farsi, he doesn't speak English, he's translating it directly, and to him he's saying, damn that. And I thought, well, have I ever said damn something? Have I ever thought, damn those teenagers? Well, yeah, I have. And Do I really want them to die and burn in hell for eternity? No. It's just after midnight. Turn down the music. Damn those teenagers. So when we travel, we gain a little better appreciation of what is the baggage that people are carrying when they respond to us. Think of the baggage we have in our country after 9/11. We're a mighty nation of 300 million people. We lost 3,000 people on 9/11 10 years ago, and it's part of our baggage, just like for our parents it was the Depression and World War II and so on. Well, Iran's got baggage, and we need to understand that if we're going to deal with them smartly. Their baggage, and they've got 1/4 of our population, is losing several 100,000 people when Saddam Hussein, funded by the United States, invaded their country. Now, I don't know if we really funded them, but they think they did, or we did, and that is baggage. And when you travel around Iran, every town's got a vast martyrs cemetery filled with victims of that war. And for me to see a widow sitting on the tomb of a dead loved one, as she's done every week for decades, knowing the propaganda she's lived through and the struggles she's lived through, that's baggage. I got to understand what she's going through if I can understand their country better. I wanted to know what makes 70 million Iranians tick, and I found out a lot by going to Iran and actually traveling there. I was standing on the street corner one day, and a woman crosses the street. She said, "Are you a journalist from America?" I said, "Yeah." And she did one of these little point on my chest things, and she said, "I want you to go home and tell the truth. We're united, we're strong, and we just don't want our little girls to be raised like Britney Spears." I said, "We got something in common here."
That's like, I mean, it's easy to say. It's hard. People should practice, and maybe the pictures on their phones are doing this now, really imagining that. I think your mom, your brother, your wife, your children dead in a bomb supported by another country that now has the audacity to say we want to liberate you, and we want to help you get rid of your evil government. We love you.
Yeah, or your little sister starved to death in a deliberately
starving. I mean,
famine.
these images now are just, I mean, like, but really get there. And to your, I do philosophy, and I hear your anger, and I did some stuff on forgiveness, and it's really tough. But to get there and to make it through with sanity is really hard. To not end up with, I want to go do some crazy shit. And if I'm going to go do some crazy shit, like the guy in New Orleans, it's great if you have a divine story as well to sort of help you get there. It's like,
Islam does say, or the hadiths or whatever say that you are mandated by God to fight in defense.
It's there.
Your family, your community, your religion. There's nothing anti-libertarian about that. That was what George Washington thought too.
Yeah.
That's what Americans believe, that we have the right to fight to defend innocent life.
Yeah, it's so funny. I did a short essay, not one of my most popular, but I thought it was kind of good. You might like it. It was called "Dear Trumpers from a Leftist," when some of this stuff was coming out about deep state. And I was like, guys, we agree. We just might disagree about who it is and what the deep state is. And my friend watched it and he really liked it. And he was like, that was kind of good. I don't think it'll be great for Trumpers, but it's great for Christians. And I was like, that's super interesting. And I was trying to really make a point to have people get into the mind. It was when Trump was saying that stuff, like, I'm going to build the French Riviera and a casino or whatever. And there was these Palestinians sitting on piles of rubble saying, like, you see this rock right here, this rubble, it's worth more than any palace in Washington, D.C. Like, I love this thing. And I'm like, you get that, Americans. You get that. You know that. Like, you know that feeling, and you can get there. And I think it's like a universal thing.
Yeah, it totally is. And listen, let me just recommend here that if you've never seen this, you got to see this thing called Killing Gaza. It's Max Blumenthal and Dan Cohen, two nice Jewish boys. Go to the Gaza Strip in 2014, just at the end of the 2014 slaughter there. And they go walking around the Gaza Strip interviewing everybody. Nobody hates them for being Jews. Nobody hates them for being Americans.
I've filmed in the West
everybody
Bank.
talks
No one cares.
to them.
My last name's Shapiro.
That's right.
Nobody
And look,
cares.
and I know Max, he did not selectively edit this thing. It's just the fact that no one says the Jews this, the Christians that, jihad this, Muhammad that. Nobody. They all say what you just said. You see this dirt belongs to me, and I'll fight you over it. That's it. You're not taking it. That's what they all say. They sound just like Texans, every last one of them.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, there's more to, I mean, there's your wealth of knowledge is so deep that I'm just going to have to recommend people watch. I watched that talk you gave wearing the Free Gaza hoodie that was really good a couple months ago. It was on your channel that people should really, really watch. I think it's fantastically good. You and I probably agree on just about everything. And then we're both ready for a major shakeup. The truth is, I just want to meet people like you out in the street when this thing is coming down, and it seems like it's coming down because we need to do this differently. And I'll let you have the last word, but for me, there's so many on-ramps into this conversation right now. Like I keep mentioning, Epstein is a huge one for people, which is fascinating. Right. Gaza itself,
the Iran war too.
What happened in Iran is a huge on-ramp for people. Gaza is a massive one. Obviously, I think there's a ton coming even in Africa. Like you could only keep kind of the hypocrisy of an empire like this under wraps so long, and it's just busting at the seams everywhere. And people are, I hope, asking questions. And that deepest one, like I said, is like for the liberal-minded person, they might be like, I don't want to know. I just want to go to the grocery store. I trust my government has my best interest in mind. I feel like they're under a lot of strain and pressure that they are losing that faith of my government has my best interest in mind. It's like, do they, yeah. or is this just out of control? Is this a machine out of control?
Thing.
Yeah.
You know, maybe this is like because of my own insecurity or whatever deep-seated psychological problems I have.
Yeah.
But I hate it when people lie to me.
Oh, so does my wife.
You know, like I remember in school they taught us how stop is a complete sentence because you is implied. It's just I don't have time to say you stop, but it's still like it's implied. It's still there, right? So when you're lying to me, there's a bunch of insults implied at the beginning of that about what a stupid and worthless piece of shit I am that you get to just tell me any lie that you want in order to cynically use me and manipulate me to serve your purposes.
Yeah.
So anyone lies to me, they're declaring me their enemy. And so I hate them back.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, the Israelis do nothing but lie to me all day. The Democrats and the Republicans do nothing but lie to me all day.
Yeah.
You think they probably have your best interests at heart? Like, show me, not you, but liberals, people out in the world, and show me an example of this. I mean, I was raised in the shadow of Vietnam and Richard Nixon, where liberals all hated the government because the government lied us into war.
Yeah.
You know, where every homeless guy was wearing a green army jacket.
Yeah.
You know, that's your government that loves you so much. The same people that lied you into Vietnam. The same people who lied you into Iraq and Afghanistan, not just lied us into those wars, lied us into staying for decades in these wars. Millions killed, 4 million killed, 37 million people displaced from their homes.
Yeah.
America is the world empire, the most destructive force on the planet. And Israel is the worst thing about our country and the worst disincentive that we have in our political culture and in our political economy to doing the right thing. We can't because we have this millstone stuck around our neck that says we have to serve their interests no matter how much it's a detriment to our own. So that's really is step one is end all entangling alliances. And you know, people, I don't know what, George Washington is passé or whatever. People should read his farewell address. This guy's IQ was like 160 something, right? The thing is fantastic. And just the part on foreign policy is probably 4,000 words or something. Yeah. And he warns us, don't put the United States in the service of any other power. And he explains why, too, because these passionate attachments then create all of these unholy divisions here.
Yeah.
And you have people who are willing to serve a foreign country's interests over their own. And if they get dominant, they will then say that anyone opposed to that is the one who's the traitor and that they are the true patriots. And all of this stuff, he goes on and on about all the detriments, about making an alliance with a country means now you have made enemies out of all of their enemies too, whether you have any real reason to fight with them or not, or the rest. Same for Thomas Jefferson, who is at least, you know, probably smarter than and wiser than Washington in many ways. Said the same thing. Our policy, our permanent policy should be to steer clear of any permanent alliances with any portion of the foreign world. We should have peace, commerce, and honest friendship with all nations, entangling alliances with none of them.
Yeah. I think
so if you just said, oh, well, those guys own slaves or whatever, well, fine. But like, could you find a flaw in what they're arguing here and why and how they argue that America must mind its own business. Otherwise, we are going to become the business of everybody else in the world and we'll always regret it.
Yeah.
Look at us now. Look at the amount of, for just one example, the amount of weight that Israel throws around in Washington. Well, why?
Yeah, can I get
because we're the world empire. But if we were a limited constitutional republic, they would be lobbying somebody else all day to do their dirty work for them.
I mean, can I get you on that one? Because I haven't quite gotten your and you're feel free to say what you want about it. But like, how did that happen then? How did Israel become so influential? Is this? I mean, their names all over the JFK files too. Like all of the incentives when people go back through history are like ridiculous, but people are going to start going through this stuff. Like how
I'll tell you,
did it happen?
It's as I said before, the main answer is the Walton Mearsheimer answer, which is they spend a bunch of money and they're organized and they play the game of democratic politics extraordinarily well.
Yeah.
They're single issue people. They never forgive. I mean, they never forget.
What's preventing us from cutting them off then? I mean, like, what's preventing it from just stopping it? Is it just
well, I don't know if they killed JFK or not. The story is that JFK was trying to get
AIPAC to register. Yeah, I'm only putting that out there. AIPAC to register and the nuclear bomb. And
I recommend to your audience, what you should do is read all of Grant F. Smith's books. Grant F. Smith is America's greatest expert on the Israel lobby in this country and their legal and illegal doings, their spying and their manipulations and their blackmail and their corruption, as well as just the straightforward and open part of the business. But, the neoconservatives are a major part of this too. People call everybody a neocon these days, but the neoconservatives are a small faction of people, probably 100 men or less, who move from the Trotskyite left to the Reaganite right. And many of them got jobs in the George W. Bush administration, lying us into war with Iraq. The axis of crystal is what Justin Raimondo called them. And they are the Likud. They are Israel's fifth column in the United States. And where, like back in the 1970s, as they were moving to the right, they made an alliance with the military industrial complex because oil and banking basically already had the CFR. As I was saying, it was the Rockefeller world empire, right? But in those days, especially, they would only allow so many Jews into the CFR. Right. It was in those days, it was still like a very waspy Brooks Brothers-y type of a thing. And there were still country clubs in America where there were no Jews allowed and that kind of thing at that time. And so the neoconservative movement, which was heavily Jewish, although not exclusively so, there were Catholics and Presbyterians and at least one Muslim involved and others. But they were all Zionists and very pro-Israel and in many cases directly tied to the Likud party in Israel. And they made an alliance with the military industrial complex. You guys need eggheads. We need money. And so especially Lockheed, but also Northrop Grumman and Raytheon and Boeing and the rest got behind these guys and financed their own forest of think tanks. You guys have the Council on Foreign Relations. Fine. We have the Washington Institute for Near East Policy and the Center for Security Policy and the Committee on the Free World and the Foreign Policy Initiative and the Project for a New American Century, the American Enterprise Institute, Heritage and Hudson. And whatever, they created their own and took over some previously standing conservative ones. But with all that Lockheed money, the sky's the limit. They founded the Weekly Standard magazine. They already owned the National Review. But this was their leg up and what is it? It's all tax money.
Yeah.
Lockheed takes $50 billion out of the treasury. Then they recycle 50 million of it in paying these neocons to write the studies and write the newspaper editorials and deliver the Fox News rants to deliver them their wars and their weapons sales. And so it's a perfect mob marriage. And then, of course, as it's so funny, because again, with the cynicism here, they will blatantly say, yeah, but that money we give it to Israel, it all comes back to the United States and is spent on weapons here. Well, again, that's great if you work for Lockheed or invest in Lockheed. If you're one of the rest of us, that's my money you took out of my check and then you bounced it off the roof of a foreign country and then gave it to Lockheed.
Yeah.
I'm supposed to be celebrating that? Are you crazy? You should just shut up instead of trying to tell me that that's for my benefit when you're just making me angry, But then, and this is what the liberals, especially the Democrats in the run up to the last election, They were so desperate because the Ukraine war was an absolute disaster. They had promised they were going to force the Russians out and reclaim every last square inch of Ukrainian territory and give whatever it takes for as long as it takes and win the war. And they were doing nothing but lose and nothing but lose. So what they come up with? They came up with, oh yeah, but the war is good for building up America's defense industrial base.
Yeah.
The military industrial complex, that's a crazy conspiracy theory. But the military industrial complex is the best part of America. And it's why we have to stay at war all the time, is so we can keep funneling confiscated tax dollars and counterfeited inflationary money into the coffers of these few selected corporations that make weapons of death and destruction.
Yeah.
And doesn't that make you feel patriotic, good, liberal, democratic American Kamala Harris voter, that ultimately this war in Ukraine might be really, 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 really bad for Ukraine, but it's good for Boeing.
Yeah.
So salute the flag and say your Pledge of Allegiance and be happy, rejoice that the defense industrial base is succeeding somehow while all of the rest of America fails. And the thing is, like, back to your main point.
Yeah.
How long can this facade last? The war's good for the economy? No, it's not. The empire protects our security? No, it doesn't. Israel is our greatest ally? No, they're not.
Yeah.
So, okay. Right. Like, you can only live by lies so long before they just don't feel like they could possibly be true anymore.
Yeah.
Same thing I like to say about support for Israel on the right. The right used to support the war in Iraq too, until they didn't.
Yeah.
And then it was like, oh my God, what did we do?
Yeah.
It wasn't me, but it was all of you guys were stupid and wrong for insisting that we do that. You know what I mean? But everyone regrets it now. Nobody stands by that war now except for John Bolton and Eli Lake and Jonathan Chait.
Yeah. Well, what do you think is going to happen next? Just for a final sort of, like, the world is, I mean, it seems like anything could happen right now. And it's a massively dangerous time, because what you and I certainly agree on is the facade and the mythology that's propping up the empire is popping like a balloon, but it's an empire that is built on a massive amount of destructive technology and weaponry that is not just going to go unused, especially like you said, if actually Wendy Brown, who's a philosopher very much on the left, who you'd probably really, really like a lot, wrote this fantastic book called Waning Sovereignty, Higher Walls or something. And the general thesis is sort of how neoliberal economics and the machine got so out of control that governments really don't have much to do anymore other than try to manage this monster. And then to sort of justify their own being, they become obsessed with security and immigrants and building walls, because that's the one thing they feel like they can do. And in most of it's theater. And are we that secure or whatever? You know, if there's another 9/11 type attack, I mean, obviously that was a huge motivation. Osama bin Laden, for all you want to say about him, wasn't a dummy and was trying to do something to pierce the thing that you just said of like, oh, you think you're so secure? Look at this. I'll do this thing, you know, from within. If something like that happens,
and bait us into overexpansion and suicide.
Right. And
beat us the hard way.
Yeah.
The long way and the hard way.
Yeah, they have long visions. I did an episode with Richard English, who wrote a book called Does Terrorism Work? That's fantastically interesting and challenging. But so what do you think is going to happen? Because you and I are interested in this, what's happening now, because we feel like this might be an end phase.
I don't know.
But it's going to be
I don't know. I mean, look,
yeah.
They just started a war with Iran that they can't end.
Yeah,
right. Iran's not going to give up enrichment,
and China
has
not going to be able to. China has refueled them or restocked them. Is that they said they sent planes or something, or missile defense?
I don't know. I don't know about that. I think I'd have to look into that. But I know that as of now, America at will has total air superiority over Iran. Trump has already proved he's called the Ayatollah's bluff already. Your latent nuclear deterrent is not enough to deter me, pal. Yeah. And in fact, if you try to reconstitute it again, I'll bomb that too. So on the other hand, the Ayatollah is not going to give up enrichment. He's going to keep doing it and then forcing Trump to keep bombing him, which Trump has already threatened to do again. And then that problem will be solved.
Too. You know?
Yeah. Well,
if the Epstein files get a little too close to Trump, you know, he'll press some buttons elsewhere. He's already trying. That would be a big one.
Yeah, we'll see. He does seem extremely defensive about them. We all know he had a relationship with Epstein for a very long time. even if he ever crossed those lines, I don't know how there would be any proof of that anyway. If the FBI had it in their files that they knew that Trump had crossed those lines, they would have destroyed him with it a long time ago.
Yeah.
And so, but he very well could be protecting other people, though, especially Israel, but also individuals, very powerful individuals in the United States. And I don't know if you saw this, but Wired magazine published a heat map of all the cell phone location data of all the people who went to Epstein Island.
I feel like we should know a lot more from that. Yeah.
It is a lot of people, including Austinites and including a ton of people from Aspen and Martha's Vineyard and all the fancy.
I've zoomed in on a few of the circles, being like, I think I'm, yeah.
So this is it's a huge deal. In fact, in the New York Times today, there is a piece by a guy who says, look, here's 9 questions we need to know about Epstein.
Yeah.
And he raises, the possibility that he worked for Israeli intelligence. He raises the fact that we know from government accusations, at least in their lawsuit or in facts that they've had to turn over for lawsuits, that thousands of girls between the ages of 12 and 17 were trafficked to that island and back. They can't claim otherwise.
Yeah.
And, we know this guy palled around with Bill Clinton forever. He had Leslie Wexner, who is extremely close to Israel, as part of the mega group of pro-Israel donors, gave him the most expensive mansion in all of Manhattan.
Yeah.
Gave it to him. Had this giant ranch out in New Mexico, died with a $600 million fortune. And by the way, had no reason to kill himself when he still had 100 cards to play at that time. And I think just, that one guy went on TV and they interviewed him about something else. He was just some good old boy from the South somewhere. And he just said at the end, Epstein didn't kill himself. And that just went viral as hell because everybody knew it. Everybody was like, yeah, come on, why would he? Yeah. It's not like he was going to general population the day after tomorrow where he was going to get held down and treated the same way he'd done to so many. There's nothing like that in his near-term future whatsoever. So it just rang true to people that this guy was murdered and silenced because he had compromised and was compromised by so many other powerful people.
It seems to have ripped off the mask of a lot of the
and
empire.
Look, I was saying this for so long about Joe Biden. His entire career is just nothing but shame.
Yeah.
He was horrible on everything since 1973. According to Branko Marchteach, one of the first things he did when he got to the Senate in 73 was denounce Nixon for his hasty and precipitous withdrawal from Vietnam. Right? He's the worst person in the world. He's as bad. He supported all the worst things that everyone who was president his entire career ever did and pressured them to be worse on everything. The only thing he ever got right was opposing Iraq War I. And that was an accident. That was just political posturing and made a bad bet. But otherwise, the guy's just nothing but the devil. But nobody knows that. TV will never tell you that. TV will never say that this guy teamed up with Strom Thurmond to call Reagan weak on crime and demand that he crack down and lock up more black people for more decades for just possessing drugs that they were sold by the CIA, by Reagan's same intelligence agencies. They'll never tell the people that this guy mongered all these wars and the Balkans and in the Middle East and all these things. However, though, your next door neighbor's auntie's cousin knows that he is too old for this because you don't have to know anything about politics at all to take one look at Joe Biden and know that, well, maybe he could have been president 20 years ago or something, but he can't be now. He's just too old. And it's the same thing with Epstein. It's a little more complicated. It's not just take one look at him, but did someone say child rape? I mean, what are we talking about here?
Exactly.
This is, no matter who you are, you know what that is. And then someone tells you, yeah, by the way, this guy was really powerful. He's connected to Donald Trump and Bill Clinton.
Yeah. And
he was palling around. And he got and Ehud Barak, and got a sweetheart deal. And the prosecutor said he was told by his bosses,
he belongs to
which could only be the attorney general or the deputy attorney general, that this guy belongs to intelligence and lay off. And so your next door neighbor's auntie's cousin can understand that too.
Yeah.
Right? That's not that complicated at all. This guy was allowed to do this for decades. Was allowed by Janet Reno and Bill Clinton. Was allowed by John Ashcroft and Alberto Gonzalez and Michael Mukasey and George W. Bush. was allowed by Bill Clinton, by Barack Obama and Merrick Garland. No, that was by, who's Obama's attorney general? I'm so stupid. Anyway.
I don't know. I don't remember.
All these guys, they let this happen. They had to have known what was going on. FBI counterintelligence had to have known who this guy was and what he was doing. And they liked it.
Yeah.
He either worked for the agency or the Mossad or both. And they let him get away with it. And what are they going to say? You know what? Acosta, the guy that gave him the sweetest deal that any convicted child rapist ever got in American history, he didn't really say that. That must be it. Yeah, someone heard him wrong when he said that he was told that this guy belongs to intelligence and to back off. Yeah. That rhymes with a lot of things people say. Maybe someone was just humming a Billy Joel song under their breath, and that was what they thought they heard him say. That this guy belongs to intelligence, and I'm to give him the sweetest deal that a child rapist ever got.
Piano
I have
man,
an idea.
Intelligence man.
Let's waterboard Alex Acosta and see what he has to say.
Yeah.
Enough of it. And it's one of these where, right, like we could sit here and argue for 2 hours about who started the fire at Waco. I'm right. It was the government, but whatever. It's debatable.
Yeah.
It's debatable.
Yeah.
You can't debate that this guy was allowed to do this.
Yeah.
Why? To serve the interests of a foreign power. Back to the Jesus thing. This is what the Bible says, that Americans have to let Israelis set up their children to be raped.
Yeah.
So that they can take pictures of the rapists and blackmail them and enslave them. That's in the Bible. That Jesus says that you have to give in to this. Really?
Yeah.
Or, nope, you were lied to. That's over with. Snapped out of it.
And then what?
Couldn't possibly be. Well, there's a crack up coming, man. It's a big crack up coming. And when the other side of the argument has nothing other than this ridiculous crap about forcing Jesus to come back and end the world, and they have no other arguments. They have no other positive claim about Israel to make.
The end of the world, you're probably in a bad spot.
Yeah, let me tell you, we got a great plan. Our plan is we're going to force Jesus to come back, and then 600 Jews will convert to Christianity, and all the rest of them will be sent to hell to burn forever.
Yeah.
That's the main reason America has to support Israel, everybody. You got that?
Yeah.
They got nothing left.
Yeah.
So
a big crack
there's
up
a crack up coming, man.
I'll let you go. I'm going to recommend, because I know it was like a fire hose of a lot of things, which are fascinating, but your knowledge on and anger and chip on your shoulder about America's escapades, especially in the Middle East, is fantastic. So I hope you don't stop. It was a lot. I'm gonna have to re-listen to it again. Yeah, all your books.
Yeah, read my books, man. I wrote enough already about the Middle East and Provoked about Eastern Europe. And that's everything I know. So we want to catch up.
We'll keep banging the drum. Well, it was great talking to you. It was really a lot of fun.
Absolutely. Thank you very much for having me.
Thanks, man. So I really enjoyed that, but I think you heard there's a few topics and things that I felt a little unsatisfied with that I don't think I really got out on the table that I just want to do here. It's totally great. We need to get better about talking, across aisles and everything, but I won't make full arguments here, but I just want to mention 4 things that I think there needs to be much more said about, which I'm going to be doing much more on my show with other guests and essays. One's on sort of the economics and mechanics of empire that I just want to say a little bit more about. 2 is, I think, this sort of habit of, especially on the libertarian right, of glossing over, I think, a true moral dilemma on the question of intervention or interventionism. I just want to say a little bit about. The next one is sort of the one I kept picking up on and never quite getting there on, Scott kept saying that Israel and its interests are diametrically opposed to America's interests. And I think there's still something missing there that I would just want to say something briefly about, or what I think might be going on there. And then the last one's just on sort of the personal interplay between beliefs and motivations and stated intentions. So on that first one, on the economics of empire, I'm going to be talking much more, like I mentioned on the show, about things like the petrodollar and whatever. I think the potential sort of cycle of economics that really perversely incentivizes a lot of behavior in the world, where I was sort of putting out that potentially they need this to happen. It's something I want to talk much more about on the show. I think on the libertarian right, there can be a real obsession, one that I understand and agree with, on sort of the evils of state oppression that can miss, I think, the very real dangers of private industry oppression, or how state oppression can morph or grow out of just the mechanisms of private industry. Something like the East India Company is a great example of that, or even something like in Iran with the coup of Mossadegh. Was that driven by state interest of wanting control, or is that driven by private interest of wanting control over the oil and the British Petroleum Company, or is it both? I mean, the revolving door between banks and private industry and government, I think, is self-evident. So I think there's just sometimes a bit of an obsession about state control that can miss some of that conversation. Anyway, that's that one. The second one so I think glossing over this moral dilemma, I think a true moral dilemma about intervention is something that is a little bit too easily dismissed by the libertarian right. So as just a really brief sort of history lesson, the America First mantra, which is so ascendant again now, really took center stage in America pre-World War II with Charles Lindbergh and the America First Committee. And of course, they were making a strong argument that we should not intervene. And this, of course, goes back to World War I, when Woodrow Wilson started the League of Nations, but then his own people, his own Congress, voted against joining it, which is interesting. So America as an isolationist, non-interventionist country, which of course I think libertarians want to go back to, again, they might be right. But I think the moral dilemma of intervention, I think, needs some serious consideration. So this was a cartoon, I'm going to put it on the screen, put out by the America First Committee that was sort of mocking, I think, FDR and wanting to intervene in the world and maybe rightfully fearing a sort of situation where we would become entangled in foreign interests. Of course, Scott is hearkening back there with that language to George Washington's farewell address a lot. But then this one, Dr. Seuss was actually commissioned to draw it to mock the America First position, and shows, this woman reading a bedtime story or whatever and saying something like, the wolf was devouring children, but they were foreign children, so it doesn't really matter. And you could see sort of the shock on the kids' faces because it points out this kind of moral hypocrisy of what's the difference of those children and your children. I mean, I think there's something to that. Of course, I understand that if you get so entangled, or you actually are benefiting from that wolf existing, which is very possible with entanglements and imperialism, then this is sort of a dishonest framing of it. But just on a personal level, the question of, if my neighbor is being abused by her husband, should I intervene? Should I get involved in that? Or will I become so entangled that it will become a problem? I think you could kind of scale that up on an international stage, and it doesn't really go away. I don't really have an answer for it. I certainly hear the libertarians saying, nope, just extreme non-intervention, period. But I do think the moral dilemma of what is brought up even in this cartoon still remains. Of course, maybe the arguments that you can't do it because you will just hopelessly become entangled in a way that you will end up becoming that wolf. Anyway, it's an open conversation, but I think a little too easily sort of dismissed without a true acknowledgement of it. And then, so this one, the Israel's role maybe as an agent of controlled chaos. So I kept trying to push this idea when Scott was saying, their interests are diametrically opposed to our interests, which he might be right to a certain degree. But I also think, and whether this was intentional or not, or maybe Henry Kissinger and his friends figured out a way to use the Israel lever to their advantage, because you can certainly imagine if Israel was never created in that space, especially, let's say it was put in Uganda and Kenya, where, of course, it was proposed, and Herzl even kind of wanted it there. Isn't that better, right? You pissed off all of the Middle Eastern states who have all this oil that you want, so you could just be friends with everyone, like Scott said, and make all these deals. But my argument is I'm not so sure it's not more to your benefit, or it worked out this way, that sure, we're friends now, but with brutal monarchies, because you've pissed off everyone in the Middle East by doing this Israel project, that's for sure. And it's created a ton of resentment that takes on this very fervent anti-American, anti-Israel fervor that's very scary to people. So then you get these monarchies and you install them to help suppress that, and then you do business with them, the same like what we did in Saudi Arabia and now Qatar and everywhere else. That sort of agent of controlled chaos that Israel continually fuels this resentment that makes that so scary that you can't have it sort of take over the country. Because of course, if they do, and I kept suggesting this, if they do, they're going to renegotiate those deals or maybe cut off the oil entirely to the West. So this situation that's emerged of strong men and royal families and kings or whatever you have in the whole region, or like the Shah we had in Iran until that one sort of got away. But all of these strong men that we prop up give us these great deals on the oil, really, and get involved in the petrodollar system, is sort of justified because they're keeping these, maybe like the Houthis or whoever, these anti-Israel, anti-American, anti-Western, scary people from taking over the country. So if Israel wasn't in that equation, I think you might have a better chance at a democratically, liberated Middle East. Like Scott said, we could be friends with them, but I think the oil deals would start getting much worse because, of course, the people there would want a better deal. So anyway, that's just an argument that for better or worse, and of course, I think for much, much worse, Israel has wedged itself into a situation of becoming an asset to the empire by being this perpetual, agent of chaos and resentment. And of course, they have their own divine, desires to expand to greater Israel and whatever, and those ones certainly are diametrically opposed. And then the very last one is just sort of on this the interplay of beliefs and motivations and stated beliefs on a personal level. I played the David Cross joke, and it's great. And someone like Bin Laden has interview after interview after interview saying, what I'm pissed about is America's, involvement in Israel and support of Israel and the Saudi bases and all of this stuff. This Mohammed Atta, like he mentioned, after the bombing of a UN shelter in Lebanon that killed, 107 Palestinians or something, joins Al-Qaeda. Like there's these very obvious political, earthly reasons of resentment to join these groups. And those are motivations, absolutely. But we should not also ignore that Bin Laden reads from the Quran and has his interpretation and spreads that, and at least viewed himself partially as a voice of religion. Or even like the New Orleans driver that we mentioned who was a U.S. military service member just a few years before, probably saw a lot of stuff, I'm sure was horrified and motivated by the genocide in Gaza and awful things that he's seen. But also, by the time he's driving that truck, has declared his allegiance to ISIS and saying he wants to separate the believers from the unbelievers. I flashed it on the screen quickly. Obviously, Scott bashed Sam Harris in there because someone like Sam only focuses on one part of that story and that motivation. But it's possible also for someone like Scott to erase that part because it's inconvenient or whatever for either of them and only focus on the other one. Well, I think we need a more holistic psychological conversation of how they interplay in a personal sort of maybe justification or divine cover story for what you're about to do. I talked about this a little bit in my Do You Condemn Hamas essay, which gets into some of that stuff. But anyway, I just think that we need to be a little bit more honest and not sort of just erase the part that we don't like. It's all there. So anyway, like I said, this conversation, this time we're in, is making a lot of interesting bedfellows. I've talked to libertarians before. I always have these kinds of questions for them. But I think we just all need to start getting better at it and figuring this out together. And so I'm going to be talking about this stuff and much, much more in my future conversations. And if you've made it this far, I certainly think that I deserve a like and a subscribe. So go ahead and hit them. I'm trying to grow the channel. I have a lot more interviews and essays and stuff coming out. My next one is with Radhika Desai. We're going to talk all about BRICS and her excitement for it in a way as maybe a challenge to American dollar dominance and hegemonic power. And then I have many, many more really interesting ones coming up. So please do like this one and subscribe and share it and all that stuff. I really appreciate it. And I'll see you soon.